On a hill, on an island that the world once tried to forget, there is a tree. Beneath that tree, there is a grave. A young woman comes to visit it. She kneels in the grass. She does not speak. She listens to the wind in the leaves above her, and she waits for a bird that always comes. The boy who is buried here was 19 years old when he died. He was loved, he was feared, he was hated. The world had to be rebuilt because of him. Tonight, friend, we will tell his story. Tonight, friend, you have found Mr. K-Law. This is the quiet broadcast where the great characters of our time are remembered slowly and remembered fully. I am the keeper of their stories. You are the listener who does not need them to hurry. Before we begin, leave a thought below. If you have ever wondered whether a single person can be both the hero and the threat of their own story, I would like to know what you think. And if you would like to find me again, the subscribe button is there. The light is low, the night is long, and the story is ready. Some names belong to history, friend. Others belong to the dark hours between sleep and memory. The name we begin with tonight belongs to both. Eren Yeager, the boy from Shiganshina, the soldier who became a titan, the man who shook the world. Long before there was any name for what he would become, there was only a boy who looked up. He lived inside 3 rings of walls, on an island that the rest of the world had been taught to forget. The outermost wall was called Maria. It was 50 meters tall. It had stood for 100 years. The people who lived in its shadow had learned to call that shadow safety, and the air inside the walls clean, and the cattle on the inner slopes peaceful. Almost no one looked up. The boy looked up. His name then was Eren Yeager, and he was, by every measure that the people around him used, an ordinary child. He was the son of a doctor. He lived in a small house at the edge of a district called Shiganshina, on the southernmost edge of the southernmost wall, in a corner of the world that the wider world did not visit. He had dark hair. His eyes were green. His mother packed his lunch. His father walked through the same gate every morning, carrying the same leather case, and came home to the same wooden table at the same hour. There was nothing about Eren Yeager in those years before anything happened that should have made the world remember him, except the looking up. Above the wall, you understand, there were birds. The birds of the world inside the walls were the same as the birds of the world outside the walls, small, light-boned creatures that did not know that any wall existed at all. The birds crossed the wall the way you might cross a line drawn in the dust, up and over, out and back. They did not need permission. They did not need ceremony. They simply went where the wind took them, and then they came home, if home was where they meant to come. And that was all. Eren Yeager watched them. We do not have the records of every hour of his childhood. The story that survives, the story Hajime Isayama gave us, the story the world repeated for almost 12 years in print and 4 more on screen, begins, properly, in the year 845, with a different kind of looking. But before any of that, before the wall fell, before the running and the screaming, there are quieter scenes. A child sitting at the base of a stone staircase, eyes turned upward. A child watching a friend's grandfather unwrap a book that the law said no one should own. A child asking, in the way only children ask, why the wall was there at all, when the birds did not need it. He was told that the wall protected him. He understood that. He was told that the wall was the price of being alive. He understood that too. What he did not understand, what no adult around him quite knew how to explain to him, was why the price had to be the sky. His best friend was a boy called Armin Arlert. Armin was thinner than Eren, and quieter and slower to anger. But Armin's grandfather had hidden, in a chest beneath the floorboards of his home, a book. The book was forbidden. It described things that the people in the walls were not supposed to know existed. Mountains of ice, fields of water that stretched to the horizon and could not be drunk, burning sand, a sky filled with what the book called auroras, colors moving in slow waves across the dark. The 2 boys read it together. They were small enough that, when they sat side by side on the floor with the book open between them, their knees touched. They read it more than once. They read it so often that, years later, when one of them finally stood on a beach and saw, for the first time in his life, the actual ocean, when the salt finally reached his face, He would weep, not from joy, but from disappointment that there was, somehow, still a horizon beyond. But all of that was years away. In those first years, when the wall was still standing, and the birds were still crossing it, and the doctor still walked through the gate every morning, the dream the two boys carried between them was very small and very specific. They wanted to leave, not to fight, not to conquer, not to save the world. They simply wanted to see what was on the other side of the line that had been drawn for them before they were born. They wanted, in the smallest possible sense of the word, to be free. This is the word, friend, that will follow Eren Yeager from the first chapter of his life to the last. He will use it more times than any other character in the story uses it. He will name himself by it. He will fight for it. He will misunderstand it. He will redefine it. He will die for it. And by the end, long after we have buried him beneath a tree on a hill on the island he never quite escaped, the only freedom he will have managed to give will be a freedom he gave to someone else. So we begin with the word itself, and with the boy who first whispered it, looking up. To understand what freedom meant to Eren Yeager, we must understand what the cage was. The cage was not metaphorical. It was 3 walls of bound, hardened stone, taller than any cathedral, and longer than any nation. The outermost was called Maria, 50 meters of impossible weight. The middle was called Rose. The innermost, the place where the rich and the royal slept, was called Sina. Each was concentric with the next, the way the rings of a felled tree are concentric, and the people who lived in them had spent a century forgetting why the rings existed at all. The official version of the story they had been told went like this. 100 years before Eren's birth, a great catastrophe had swept across the wider world. Mountains of flesh, giants, called Titans, had risen from somewhere, no one knew where, and devoured nearly all of humanity. The last surviving fragment of the human race had been led by a king named Karl Fritz to this island. And on this island, the king had raised the 3 walls, and inside the walls the survivors had been kept safe. Outside the walls, the official story said, there were only Titans now. There was no one left. There were no nations. There were no oceans. There was nothing. This was not what had happened. But Eren did not know that yet. No one inside the walls knew it yet, except for a handful of people in the deepest rooms of the innermost wall, who guarded the secret as carefully as kings have always guarded secrets. So the cage was sold to the people who lived in it as a gift. The walls were not a prison. They were a blessing. They were what kept them alive. They were the only reason their children had been allowed to be born at all. And in return, the people inside the walls were asked to give up almost everything that the people outside the walls had once taken for granted. The sea, the desert, the snow, the mountains, the great trade routes, the night sky, the freedom to go anywhere they wished. The walls were a gift on these terms. The walls were a deal. Most of the people inside the walls did not feel the deal. They had been born to it. The deal was the air they breathed. There were 3 kinds of people by and large who lived inside the walls. There were those who knew the deal was a deal and had grown comfortable with it and made their living inside it. There were those who did not think about the deal at all, who simply ate and married and worked and buried their dead within the rings. And then there were those who knew, instinctively, that something was wrong and could not put it into words, and went a little mad inside themselves because of it. Eren was the 3rd kind. He told his father once, he was 9, perhaps 10, that the people who lived inside the walls were like cattle. He said it without cruelty. He said it the way a child says something true that he has not yet learned to be afraid of saying. His father, the doctor, did not correct him. Grisha Yeager, instead, said nothing for a long time, and then asked his son a different question. The question was about what Eren wanted to do when he was older. The answer was already known. Eren wanted to join the Survey Corps, the small, doomed band of soldiers who rode out beyond the gate every few months and came back with 1/3 of their number missing and reported, each time, that the outside was still full of monsters. Eren wanted to ride with them. He wanted to ride beyond the gate. He did not particularly want to kill anything yet. He simply wanted to see what was out there, with his own eyes, that the books and the official versions had not told him. He wanted to know what the cage was keeping out, or, possibly, in. His mother, Carla, did not want him to join the Survey Corps. Carla had buried too many neighbors' sons already. Carla had heard the bell ring too many times. She had watched the gate open and close and open and close, and she knew what came back and what did not. She told Eren, more than once, that he was special simply for being born, that he did not need to be anything else, that he did not need to prove anything to the world to be worth what he was already worth. We will return to Carla, friend. We will return to her at length in the next chapter, because the story of Carla Yeager is also the story of how a boy learns the word revenge. But for now, in this chapter, we are speaking only of the cage and of the boy inside it who could not stop looking up. The cage, you see, was not made only of stone. The cage was made of the story that the stone was the only thing keeping them alive. And that story, that the world outside was empty, that there was nowhere else to go, that the wall was a gift, was the part of the cage that, in the end, no army could break. Only the truth could break it. And the truth was buried in a basement, in the house of a doctor, in a small district at the edge of the southernmost wall. The boy did not know yet that the basement was there, but the basement, in some sense, had been waiting for him since before he was born. Before the wall fell, before the basement opened, before any of the great catastrophes of his life began, Eren Yeager committed his first free act. He was 9 years old. His father had taken him on a house call, out into the country beyond Shiganshina, to visit a family of 3. The family lived in a wooden cabin, in a clearing at the edge of the forest. The wife was Asian, one of the only Asians left within the walls, descended from a people who had quietly survived a state-ordered persecution decades earlier. The husband was a hunter. The daughter was a girl of 9, the same age as Eren, with dark hair cut at the shoulders, and the dark eyes of her mother. Her name was Mikasa. Eren and his father arrived at the cabin to find the door ajar. The husband and the wife were inside. They were dead. They had been killed by 3 men. The men had not been thieves, at least not in the ordinary sense. They had been human traffickers, and what they had come to take from this cabin was not money or food, but the girl. The girl was rare. The girl could be sold. The men had killed the parents because the parents had tried to protect her, and they had taken the girl, by the time Eren and his father arrived, into the deeper woods. Eren's father told him to stay where he was. The doctor was going to fetch the police. Grisha expected, as any sensible adult would expect, that his son, a 9-year-old boy, would do what he had been told. Eren did not do what he had been told. What happened next, friend, is described in the surviving record with a flatness that almost protects the listener from it. The boy found a knife. He followed the men's tracks into the woods. He reached the cabin where they had taken Mikasa. He did not announce himself. He waited. He chose his moment. He killed 2 of them. He was a child of 9, and he killed 2 grown men, and we are told he felt no remorse afterward. The 3rd man, larger than the first 2 and slower to die, caught Eren around the throat and began to strangle him. Eren, in his last conscious seconds, said to the girl on the floor, paraphrased, "Friend, because the line belongs to the manga and not to me, that the world was a place where you either fought to live or you did not live, and that she had a choice to make right now, in this room, about which she would be." The girl, who had not moved until that moment, picked up a knife. She drove it into the back of the man strangling Eren, and the 2 children walked out of that cabin alive. Hannes, a garrison soldier, a kind man, with a weakness for the bottle and a habit of being elsewhere when he was needed, would later say that he had never seen anything like the look in Eren's eyes that day. Eren's father did not punish him, not for the killings. The boy himself did not seem to think the killings required punishment. He was not, he would say much later, particularly proud of them. They had simply been what was necessary. The men had taken what was not theirs. The men had been stopped. When Eren and Mikasa returned home, Eren limping, Mikasa following half a pace behind, her parents dead in a cabin she would not see again, Mikasa said simply that she was cold. Eren took off the long scarf from around his own neck, the scarf that had been his and his alone since his mother knitted it for him, and he wound it around hers. He did not ceremony it. He did not speak. He simply wrapped it once, and then a second time, and then a third, and stepped back, and looked at her. The scarf was red. It would remain around Mikasa Ackerman's neck for 12 years, until the end of his life, and then it would remain with her for every year of her own life after that, until she was buried with it. The scarf is one of the most famous objects in modern fiction. It is a symbol of more things than any single object should reasonably have to carry. But on the day it was given, friend, it was none of those things yet. On the day it was given, it was simply the first thing Eren Yeager had ever chosen, completely, to give to another person. The trafficker killing was not love. It was rage. The scarf was something else. The scarf was the beginning of a different kind of freedom. Not the freedom to break out, not the freedom to escape, but the freedom to choose what to do with what you had. Eren had a scarf. He gave it. That was a free act. It was the first one of his life. He would have very few others in the years that followed, that did not eventually turn back into chains. In Armin Arlert's grandfather's forbidden book, on a page that the two boys had turned so many times that the corner of it had gone grey from the oil of their fingertips, there was a description of the ocean. The book called it the sea. The book said that the sea was made of water that no human being could drink, and that it was so wide that, even from the highest cliff you might climb, you could not see the other side of it. The book said the sea was salt. It said the sea made its own weather. It said the sea, when it was angry, could tear apart whole cities, and when it was calm, was a thing of such silence and such size that the people who lived next to it sometimes lost the ability to speak about it at all. Eren did not believe in the sea the first time he read this. He believed in it the second time. By the third time, he had decided that he would see it someday with his own eyes. The dream of the sea is the central engine of his childhood. Everything else, the wall, the cage, the cattle, the survey corps, his mother's worry, his father's silences, is arranged around this dream. The wall is what separates him from the sea. The cage is what tells him the sea is not real. The survey corps is the only path that might take him to the sea. The dream is small. The dream is the size of a child's two hands cupped around water. And yet the dream, in its smallness, is heavier than every duty that any adult in the walls has ever asked him to carry. He shared the dream with Armin. He shared it later with Mikasa. The three of them, in the years between his 9th and his 15th birthday, traded the dream back and forth like a coin. Armin polished it with new details. Sand, shells, the color of light on water at certain hours of the day. Mikasa carried it more quietly, the way she carried most things. Eren wore it like a fever. Then, in the year 845, the wall fell. The colossal titan, 60 meters tall, the height of the wall itself, the impossible thing that should not have been possible, kicked in the outer gate of Shiganshina. The cage cracked. The cattle ran. Eren's mother died. We will not describe that, friend, in this chapter. That belongs to the next chapter. That belongs to revenge. In this chapter, the sea is what matters, because the sea was waiting on the other side of all of it. It took him 9 years. 9 years of training. 9 years of soldiering. 9 years of becoming something the books had not prepared him to become. 9 years of watching people he loved die in pieces around him. But in the year 850, after the worst battle of his life so far, after the recapture of the district where his mother had died, after they finally cracked open the basement his father had left behind, and then 4 more years after that, Eren Yeager and Armin Arlert stood on a beach. The wind was cold. The sand was rougher than the book had described. The water came up around their boots, and it was so cold that, for a moment, neither of them said anything at all. The light was grey. The sky was very large. Armin, who had carried the dream the longest, knelt down and put both of his hands into the water, and lifted them, and tasted his own fingers, and laughed, and cried, and laughed again. Mikasa stood a few paces behind, watching them. Behind her, the rest of the survey corps, the few of them who were still alive, stood in a quiet half-circle, looking out. Eren did not laugh. He did not cry. Eren said something that the manga records as a question, and that the listeners of this story have argued about ever since. Paraphrased, the line is short and famous, and I will not give it to you in full, because it belongs to the manga and to no one else. He said, looking at the horizon, that if they killed everything on the other side of that water, would they finally be free? Armin did not answer him. Armin, who had carried the dream of the sea longer than anyone, was looking at the same water Eren was looking at, and was hearing the same question, and was beginning, in that moment, to understand something about the boy beside him that had not been clear to him before. The dream had arrived. The dream had been real. The water was here. The salt was here. The horizon was here. And the boy beside him, who had once wanted only to see this view, was already looking past it. The cage had broken. The boy had walked out. And the boy had not, as Armin had hoped, become free. The boy had only learned that there were larger cages. The basement, friend, is one of the great rooms in modern fiction. For 9 years, it stood underneath a house in a destroyed district, locked, dust-filling, waiting. It was the room Eren's father had hinted at for years before the wall fell, the room he had promised Eren he would open when Eren was old enough, when the time was right. The wall fell first. The promise was broken. The room remained. When the Survey Corps finally reclaimed Shiganshina, they reclaimed it at the cost of almost their entire generation. Commander Erwin Smith died. Most of Levi's squad died. Eren himself nearly died. And in the silence afterwards, in the half-ruined house at the edge of the district where his life had begun, they descended into the basement. They opened a drawer. They found 3 journals. And in those 3 journals, the lie that had been told to every child within the walls for 100 years quietly came apart. The truth was this: the wider world had not been destroyed. The wider world was alive and prosperous and full of nations and cities and oceans. The Titans were not a natural disaster. The Titans were a people. The Titans were the descendants of a single woman, a young slave called Ymir Fritz, who 2,000 years before had touched something. The books call it the source of all living matter, and had been transformed by it. From her, every Eldian had inherited the power to become a Titan. The Eldians had ruled the world with that power for over a millennium. They had been cruel. The world remembered. When the Eldian Empire finally collapsed, the survivors who came to the island of Paradise and raised the 3 walls were not the saviors of humanity. They were the last remnant of a fallen empire, hiding behind walls of their own dead. The Titans outside the walls were not invaders. They were Eldians too. Eldians who had been turned, against their will, by a foreign government that had inherited the science of doing it and had been sent across the sea to die. The cage, in other words, had never been keeping the Titans out. The cage had been keeping the Eldians in, and the world beyond the cage, the world Eren and Armin and Mikasa had dreamed of since they were children. That world hated them. That world had been told, for over a century, that the people behind the walls were the descendants of monsters, the heirs of an empire of devils, that the children of Paradise were the rotten last drop of a poisoned bloodline. The world beyond the cage was not waiting for them. The world beyond the cage was waiting to come for them. Eren read the journals. He sat in the basement, in lamplight, in the dust, and he turned the pages slowly. He read about his father's first wife, Dina Fritz, who had royal blood and who had been turned into the Titan that ate his mother. A coincidence so cruel that even now, 4 chapters into the story we are telling, the listener may need a moment to absorb it. He read about his half-brother Zeke, born of that first marriage, whom he had never met. He read about his Aunt Faye, his father's little sister, killed by Malian officers when his father was a child. He read about a man called Eren Kruger, the spy whose mission his father had inherited, whose name his father had given him, who had known the names Mikasa Ackerman and Armin Arlet before either of them had been born. He read, friend, the entire architecture of the lie he had been raised inside, and he understood, by the time he closed the 3rd journal, that the freedom he had been fighting for was not the freedom he had thought it was. He had thought he was fighting for the freedom to leave the wall. He had been fighting, the whole time, for the freedom of one people, from the hatred of every other people on the earth. This is the moment, in most readings of the story, when Eren Yeager begins to change. Not in any single dramatic gesture. He does not weep, he does not rage, he does not announce anything to his comrades. He simply closes the third journal, and he sits in the basement for a long time, and when he comes back up the stairs into the daylight, something in him has rearranged. He has, for the first time, understood what cage he is actually in, and he has, for the first time, begun to wonder whether the cage is the kind of thing that can be broken from inside. The dream of the sea was the dream of leaving one cage. The basement told him there were others. It told him that the people on the other side of the sea wanted him, and his sister, and his best friend, and his whole island, dead. And the dream he would carry from this moment forward, the dream that would eventually become the rumbling, was no longer a dream of leaving. It was a dream of making sure no one could ever cage him again. Ymir Fritz's friend had been waiting for 2,000 years. She had been a child once, not a goddess, not a queen, not a monster, a child. The records of her early life are scattered across the manga in fragments, flashbacks given in pages of fewer than 10 panels, glimpses through other characters' eyes. But the outline of her story is this. She was born into a tribe of Eldians long before any of the walls were built, long before any of the names we know existed. Her tribe was conquered. The conqueror was a man called King Fritz. Ymir was taken from her family. Her tongue was cut out. She was used as a slave. One day she was set loose in the forest as the prey in a hunt, and she ran, and she ran, and she fell through the hollow trunk of an ancient tree into a pool of water beneath the earth, and there she touched something. The manga calls it the source of all living matter, and gives us no further explanation, and she rose from that water as the first of the Titans. The king claimed her. He made her his wife, or his slave, or his tool, depending on which page of the manga you ask. He used her power to build an empire. He used her body to bear 3 daughters, and when she died, defending him from an assassin, throwing her own life across his, the king ordered the 3 daughters to eat her corpse, so that the power of the Titans would remain in his line, and the empire would not fall. The daughters ate, the empire stood, and Ymir Fritz did not rest. What happened to her, after her body was eaten and her power dispersed, is the strangest and quietest piece of the entire mythology of Attack on Titan. She went, in some sense, somewhere else. She did not die fully. She entered a dimension that the manga calls the Paths, a place of pale sand and shifting light, where time does not move the way time moves here, where the past and the present and the future are not arranged in any particular order. And in that place, for 2,000 years, Ymir Fritz continued to build the bodies of the Titans. Every transformation, every regeneration, every wall of hardened flesh, all of it, the manga tells us, was molded by the hands of a small slave girl in a pale country, carrying a bucket of water, waiting for someone, in any of the worlds she fed, to remember that she was a person. No one remembered. The kings of her line gave her orders. She obeyed. The empire fell. New kings came. They gave her new orders. She obeyed. The world changed and changed and changed again. The Eldians were driven to the island. The walls were raised. The Titans inside the walls were entombed. The Titans outside the walls were used as weapons by the new empire of Mali, and Ymir, in her pale country, kept making them. She built them. She unbuilt them. She had the power of a god and the posture of a slave, and the difference between the two, over 2,000 years, became impossible for her to tell apart. Until Eren Yeager arrived. He arrived in her country, you understand, through what the story calls a contact, a moment in which his half-brother Zeke, who carried royal blood, touched him, and the touch dragged both of them across whatever boundary separates the world we know from the country of Ymir Fritz. Zeke went first. Zeke spoke to her first. Zeke, who had inherited a plan from his mentor to sterilize the entire Eldian people so that the cycle of suffering would end with their generation, asked Ymir for her power, and called her, in his thinking, a slave. He chained Eren in that country with the royal command. He turned to her to finish his work, And Eren broke the chains. He ran across the pale sand. He reached Ymir before Zeke could speak again. He was not, in that moment, a soldier or a king or a titan. He was a boy who had spent his entire life inside cages, who had recognized, on sight, another prisoner. He wrapped his arms around her. He held her, and what he said to her in that moment, paraphrased, friend, because the line is famous and it belongs to the manga, was that she was not a slave, that she was not a god, that she was a person, that she had a choice, and that no one in 2,000 years had ever told her so. Ymir Fritz, who had not been touched gently by anyone she could remember, began to cry. She gave him her power, not because he commanded it, because he had asked her, because, for the first time in 20 centuries, someone had treated her as if her answer mattered. This is the freedom Eren Yeager gave away. He gave it to a girl who had been a slave longer than any nation in human history has existed. He gave it to her by speaking, for 10 seconds, to her as if she were a friend. And in exchange, friend, she gave him the power to end the world. To be born to certain powers in the world of Attack on Titan is to be born already knowing what your last day will look like. The Attack Titan, the power Eren inherited from his father in the year 845, has many abilities. It is fast, it is durable, it heals, but its strangest gift, the gift the story spends years dancing around before it shows us, plainly, what it has done, is the gift of foresight. The inheritor of the Attack Titan can see the memories not only of those who held the power before him, but of those who will hold it after. The future, in other words, can be read by the present holder, because the future holders are looking backward through the same chain. This is why Eren's father knew what his son was going to do. This is why, on the night Wall Maria fell, Grisha was already running for the chapel of the Reyes family. He had seen, in his own mind, his future son in the year 854. He had seen the boy looking back at him. He had seen what the boy intended. He had felt the boy push him across the timeless paths into a chapel where he would be required to kill a family of children he had no real wish to kill. Grisha did not want to do it. The story records this clearly. He begged the holder of the founding titan, a young girl named Frida Rice, to give him her power willingly, to save the Eldians within the walls. Frida refused. She was bound, like every royal who had held the founder before her, by a vow renouncing war. Grisha could not move her with words. Grisha had a knife. Grisha had a daughter and a son and a country and a debt to a dead spy, and Grisha had also, let us be clear, friend, the voice of his future son in his head, telling him to do it anyway. He did it. He killed the Reese family. He spared one of them, a small girl who would later become Historia Rice, only because his future son told him to. He devoured Frida. He inherited the founding titan, though he could not use it because he did not have royal blood. And then, hunted, dying, he returned to Shiganshina, to the basement under his own house, where he passed both his titans, the attack and the founder, to a 15-year-old boy who had no idea what was being done to him. This is the moment, friend, in which Eren Yeager begins to be the man who shook the world. He does not remember it for 5 years. The trauma is too large. The founder's gift of memory does not give him this memory back until much later, until the year he stands in the basement, reading the journals, putting it together. But what we, the listeners, must understand is that the act came first. The boy ate the father and inherited the power, and lived the next 5 years of his life as if he were an ordinary soldier, all while a different version of him, a him from years in the future, was already pushing the past around with both hands. When Eren finally understands what he has inherited, when he finally understands that the Attack Titan can see forward, he sees forward. He sees with terrible clarity what he will do. He sees the rumbling. He sees the trampled cities. He sees the dead. He sees the moment he stands across a table from Reiner Braun in a coffee shop in Liberio and reveals himself. He sees the moment he is decapitated by a girl on a rooftop. He sees the moment Mikasa enters the mouth of his last form and ends him. He sees all of it, and he is 15 years old when he first sees it. He has, in some sense, no more freedom from that day forward. He is a boy looking at a map of his own life with the destination already marked in red. He can run, he can refuse, he can throw the map away. But every refusal, the gift tells him, only brings him closer to the marked destination, because the future he is seeing was made by his own future self, and his future self has already chosen. He cannot outrun himself. He cannot become someone else, because the someone else is already walking toward him through the years. This is the cruelest thing the story does to him, friend. It may also be the cruelest thing that is done to any character in modern long-form fiction. The boy who wanted only to be free is shown, at the age of 15, the exact shape of his own cage, and the cage is made of his own future. He cannot escape it by fighting, because every fight he wages was already shown to him. He cannot escape it by surrender, because surrender was also in the vision. He can only walk forward. He can only become, slowly, the man the vision showed him. He walks forward. We return, in the final beat of this chapter, to where we began. To a hill, on an island, beneath a tree. To the bird. Years after everything in the story you have just heard, after the rumbling and the trial of the world, and the day in the year 854, when the boy from Shiganshina died on a rooftop, with the head of the End Titan in his mother's killer's mouth, there is a quiet scene. The 3 years that follow his death have passed. The Survey Corps, or what is left of it, has begun the long work of arguing the surviving world out of obliterating Paradise in revenge. Armin Arlert has stood in front of foreign generals and called himself the man who killed Eren Yeager. Mikasa Ackerman has come home. She walks, in the final pages of the manga, up a hill that she and Eren used to race up together when they were children. There is a tree at the top of the hill. Beneath the tree, in a small clearing of grass, there is a grave. Inside the grave is a small box. Inside the small box is a head. The head is Eren's. Mikasa carried it home herself. After she did what she did on top of the End Titan, she brought it back across the sea. She buried it beneath the tree. The rest of his body, the colossal, centipede-spined corpse of his final form, is somewhere in the wreckage of the rumbling. But the part of him that mattered, the part that smiled at her, the part that gave her a scarf when she was 9 years old, the part that, in the end, asked her to be the one who set him down, is here, beneath the roots. She kneels in the grass. She speaks to him. The dialogue, friend, is short and quiet, and I will not reproduce it. She tells him a few small things. She asks him, in the way that a person asks the dead, whether he is at peace. She tells him she misses him, and then, in the silence afterwards, the wind picks up, and the long red scarf that she has worn around her neck for 12 years, the scarf he gave her, on the day she had no parents, and no home, and no name to belong to, begins to slip from her shoulders. A bird descends. The bird, small and quick, hooks its beak into the loose end of the scarf, and lifts the fabric, and winds it once back around her neck, then twice, then a third time. The bird does not look at her for long. The bird is on its way somewhere else. The bird crosses the line of the trees and is gone. Mikasa, who has not smiled in some time, smiles. She says, paraphrased, friend, because the line is small and famous, "Thank you." She says it to the bird, or to the air the bird left behind, or to the boy whose head is in the ground beneath her. The reader is not told. The reader is not asked to be told. The scene ends. This is the freedom Eren Yeager managed to keep. He could not free himself. He saw his own future from the age of 15, and he walked toward it, and he became the largest Titan the world has ever seen, and he killed more people than any single human being, in any single act, in any war the world has ever fought, and he died at the hand of the person he had loved longest. He did not get to leave the walls in the way he had wanted. He did not get to live with Mikasa in a cabin somewhere far away. He did not get to grow old. He did not even, in the end, get to keep his own body. He was buried as a head, beneath a tree, on the island he had spent his entire life trying to walk out of. But the scarf, friend, the scarf, he gave to a girl when she was cold. He gave it to her freely. He gave it to her before he was a soldier, before he was a titan, before he was the man who would shake the world. He gave it to her as a boy with hands, and he kept giving it to her, somehow, for the rest of her life, in the form of a bird that came when she needed it. That is the smallest possible kind of freedom. The freedom to give a scarf. The freedom to come back, in some shape, for someone you loved. The freedom of a bird crossing a wall that should not, in the world he had been born into, have been crossable. But it is the freedom he kept, and we, in this chapter, have followed it from beginning to end. From the boy looking up at birds crossing a wall, to a bird crossing a tree for a girl he loved. 2,000 years of slavery walked into a pale country and asked to be remembered. A century of cattle walked beneath 3 rings of stone and called it safety. A 9-year-old boy gave away his scarf in a cold evening on a road that no longer exists. A 19-year-old man, in the moment of his last breath, let the girl he loved kill him so that she would be free. This was Eren Yeager and the word he loved most. We will speak in the next chapter of the word he learned second. Carla Yeager was 33 years old on the day she died, friend, and the last thing she ever did was shout at her son. She did not shout in anger. She shouted because the alternative was to whisper, and a whisper would not have carried far enough across the broken wood and the splintered roof tiles and the dust of what had been her kitchen only an hour before to reach the place where her son and her daughter were standing. So she shouted. She shouted for them to run. She shouted for them not to come back. She shouted for the garrison soldier who had appeared at the corner of the ruined street to pick them up and carry them away, even if she herself was still pinned beneath the beam that had once been the ridgepole of her house. She shouted because the Titan was already coming. The boy did not run. The boy, who was 10 years old that afternoon, who had been laughing about something at the bottom of the hill an hour earlier, who had been told by his mother only that morning to be careful with the small things in the cabinet because they were her mother's and she wanted to keep them. That boy walked toward the rubble and put his small hands beneath the beam and tried, with every muscle in his 10-year-old body, to lift it. The beam did not move. His sister put her hands beside his. The sister, you understand, was Mikasa Ackerman, the girl whose own parents had been dead for less than a year, the girl whose first home had been a cabin in the woods, and whose second home had been this very kitchen, now collapsed beneath an impossible weight. Mikasa, who was the same age as Eren, but stronger by some measure that no one yet understood, put her hands beside his. The two of them pulled. The beam moved a finger's breadth. Then it did not move again. Carla, friend, listen to me carefully, because this is the moment the word revenge entered her son's life, and we will not see another moment like it for a very long time. Carla told them to stop. She told them she could not feel her legs. She told them she had known, somewhere in the back of her mind, since the morning the wall had broken, that she was not going to leave this house. She told the soldier, who had run up at last and who was named Hannes and whom we will return to, that she did not want him to try. She told him to take her children and run. She told her son, paraphrasing freely now, because the words belong to the manga and not to me, that he was special simply for being born, and that he did not need to do anything else with his life to deserve to be alive in it. The boy did not hear her, or he heard her, and he did not believe her. He kept pulling at the beam. The Titan was getting closer. Hannes, a garrison soldier with a soft face and a softer drinking problem, a man who had teased Eren only that morning for crying in his sleep, a man who had spent a decade telling himself that the Titans would never breach Wall Maria. Hannes ran forward and drew his swords and pretended, for 2 full seconds, that he was the kind of man who could fight a 15-meter creature with 2 thin blades and live. Then he looked at the Titan. Then he looked at the children. Then he looked at the woman beneath the beam, who was looking back at him with the steady, terrible eyes of someone who already knew what the answer was going to be. He chose the children. He picked them up, one under each arm. He turned. He ran. Eren screamed for his mother all the way down the broken street, friend, and the Titan came down to the wreckage of the kitchen and lifted Eren Yeager out of it, as gently and as carelessly as you might lift a small bird out of a bush. And Carla looked at her son one last time over the soldier's shoulder, and the Titan put her into its mouth, and it ate her. It ate her in front of him. It chewed her in front of him. It swallowed her in front of him. And the Titan, this is the cruelest thing, this small detail the story plants now, and does not pay off for nearly 100 chapters. The Titan smiled. This is the moment, friend. This is the moment that, for almost the entire first half of the manga, the listener thinks they understand. This is the moment of origin. This is the boy in the dirt, screaming, watching his mother be devoured, swearing inside himself the oath that will carry him through every page that follows. He will kill them all. He will kill every Titan on the face of the earth. He will not stop until there are none of them left. He will live for nothing else. He will be nothing else. The boy in the dirt becomes, in that 1 minute on a broken street in Shiganshina, the engine of his own life. And the engine has only one fuel, and the fuel is revenge. Or so it seems. For nearly 100 chapters, friend, that is how the story reads. A boy whose mother was eaten. A boy who lived to kill the Titans who ate her. A boy whose every action, joining the trainee corps, surviving the Battle of Trost, plugging the gate with a boulder, sacrificing pieces of himself again and again, could be read as the long, exhausting completion of an oath, made on a broken street, to a mother who could no longer hear it. This was a lie, not a lie the story told us cheaply, not a twist for the sake of a twist, a lie that Eren Yeager himself believed, in good faith, for nearly his entire short life. The oath was real, the grief was real, the fuel burned, but the engine, in the end, was not driven by what he thought it was driven by. The engine was driven by something older and stranger, and far harder to look at directly. We will reach that something by the end of this chapter. We will reach it in the basement, in the journals, in the strange architecture of the gift his father gave him without asking. We will reach it on the day, in the year 850, when he learns that the Titans had always been people, that the thing that ate his mother had been a woman, and the woman had been his father's first wife, and the wife had been, by a road too long and too dark to be explained briefly here, sent by Eren himself across the years to do it. But before we reach any of that, friend, we must stay for a little longer on the street. We must stay with the boy in the dirt, because before revenge is anything else, in the story we are telling, revenge is a real and simple thing. It is the only word a 10-year-old has for what has just happened to him, and he uses it. He uses it the way drowning men use breath. He builds his entire next 9 years on top of it. 5 years pass. 5 years in Mr. Kaylor is a single sentence, friend, but 5 years in a boy's life is half of what he has so far been. Eren Yeager is 10 when his mother dies, and 15 when he stands at the gate of the trainee corps, with his hand raised in the salute, and the recruiter walking down the line in front of him. In those 5 years, he has grown taller. He has grown harder. He has not, by any measure that anyone close to him can recognize, healed. He has been working in the fields. After the fall of Wall Maria, the children of Shiganshina were absorbed into the territory of Wall Rose, the next ring in, and the displaced population was put to work on the inner farms. The work was brutal, and the pay was nothing. The official version of the story said the work was for everyone's good, that the food shortages caused by the loss of a third of the kingdom's farmland needed every pair of hands, that the displaced were lucky to have anything at all. The unofficial version of the story said the displaced were being culled. The government, unable to feed everyone, had quietly conscripted nearly 250,000 of them into a doomed campaign to retake Wall Maria the following year. The official term for the operation was reclamation. The actual term, used by every survivor afterwards, was massacre. Almost no one came back. Armin's grandfather was among the dead, so by the time Eren reaches the trainee corps, friend, the boy from Shiganshina has buried, in the order they were buried, his country, his mother, his neighbor's grandfather, and most of the people he grew up calling by name. He is 15 years old. He has cried as much as he is going to cry. The screaming on the broken street has dried inside him into a flatter, colder thing, Not a fire, but a stone in the chest that the body has decided to carry rather than dissolve. He enrolls in the 104th Trainee Corps. So does his sister. So does his oldest friend. They are not the only ones in that class of recruits who have buried their childhoods. They are simply 3 faces in a long line of faces, and the recruiter in front of them, an old man named Keith Shadis, walks the line and screams into each face in turn, the way a man screams at horses he is not sure will hold. Eren ranks 5th in the graduating class. Mikasa ranks 1st. Armin is a middling soldier in body, but exceptional in mind. There are others in this class, friend, whose names we will come to. Reiner Braun, large and steady, the older brother figure of the cohort, whose secret will gut the listener 3 seasons later. Bertolt Hoover, his tall, soft-voiced friend. Annie Leonhardt, blonde, small, watchful. Joan Kirstein, who fights with Eren constantly and would never admit how much he respects him. Connie Springer, who jokes too much. Sasha Blaus, who is hungry too often. Krista Lenz, small and gentle, whose real name is not Krista Lenz at all. These are the people who will be standing around Eren when his life cracks open in different directions over the next 9 years. Most of them will not survive him. He does not know that yet. He does, however, know what he wants to do. He wants to join the Survey Corps. He wants to ride out the gate. He wants to kill the Titans. He says this when he is asked, with the simplicity of someone who has not yet been asked the question often enough to find a more complicated answer. The Titans took his mother. He will take every one of them. The maths is clean. The maths is also, he will discover slowly, wrong. But for now, the maths is what carries him through training. The maths is what carries him through the day. 3 years later, when the colossal Titan kicks open the gate of Trost, the very next ring of wall, the ring he was supposed to be safe behind, and the cycle begins again. He is in his graduation week, friend, when Trost falls. Imagine it. 5 years of training. The ceremony scheduled for the following morning. The recruits in their uniforms in the streets of the inner district, drinking and eating and laughing at the small things you laugh at when you have not yet been asked to die. Then a clap of thunder that is not thunder. Then a wind that is not wind. The colossal Titan, 60 meters tall, the impossible thing they had been told would never return, returns. The gate cracks. The pure Titans pour in. The cycle begins. The day that follows is the longest day Eren Yeager has yet lived. He fights. His squad, his first squad, his trainee squad, is wiped out in less than half an hour. Tom and Mylius and Mina and Thomas, names the listener barely registers because the show has not given the listener time to register them, are eaten one by one in front of him on a single rooftop. Armin freezes. Eren does not freeze. Eren picks up his blades and runs at the Titan that has just swallowed Thomas Wagner, and the Titan picks him up by the leg and bites the leg off, and Eren falls. He falls onto the roof. He lies there for a moment, looking at the blue sky, and he thinks, friend, we are not told this directly, but the panels tell us, about his mother, about the street, about the smile of the Titan, about the oath. Then Armin is being eaten in front of him. Then there is a hand inside the Titan's mouth, around Armin's head, and Armin is calling Eren's name as he is pulled down into the throat. And Eren, who has lost one leg, who is bleeding to death, who has fewer than 10 seconds of consciousness left, does the only thing he can do. He reaches up with the arm that is not yet gone, and he pulls Armin out, with his teeth in the way, and he takes Armin's place in the Titan's mouth, and the Titan swallows him. The Titan swallows him. The Titan does not swallow him. What happens next, friend, is the first scene in the story in which the listener begins to understand that Eren Yeager is not, after all, what he has been telling himself he is. Inside the Titan's stomach, in the slow, acid darkness of being eaten, Eren feels something turn over inside him. Something rises. Something has been there all along, buried since his father did whatever his father did, in the woods on the night Wall Maria fell, which Eren still does not remember. And now, in the moment of his death, that something asks to be used. He opens his eyes inside the Titan's stomach. He raises his fist. He punches. He does not die. He emerges from the back of the Titan's neck as something else. He emerges as a Titan himself. The Battle of Trost ends, days later, with a 15-year-old boy in the form of a 15-meter Titan lifting a boulder the size of a temple and walking it across the broken district to plug the gate the colossal Titan kicked open. He plugs the gate. The breach is sealed. The pure Titans inside the wall are killed by the garrison. The civilians who hid in cellars come up into the daylight. Eren collapses out of his Titan body, half conscious, his face still fused to the regenerating neck, and his sister, Mikasa, climbs onto the back of the steaming corpse and pulls his head free with her bare hands. He is not yet 16. He has not yet been taught what he has done. The official story he is told, in the days that follow, by his commanding officers, and by his squad, and by everyone around him, is that he is a hero. He plugged the gate. He saved Trost. He proved the Titans could be fought. He proved the cycle could be broken. The official story, friend, is what the official story always is. The unofficial story is that a boy whose only fuel was revenge has just discovered that he is, somehow, the same kind of creature he has spent 5 years vowing to kill. The fuel has changed shape inside him. The oath has acquired a second meaning. He vowed to kill every Titan in the world. He is now a Titan in the world. The maths, which had been clean, is no longer clean. He does not think about this yet. He is too tired. He is too young. He will think about it, friend. He will think about it for years. There is a quiet moment, in the months that follow the Battle of Trost, that the story does not draw much attention to, but that the careful listener should hold for a moment. Eren is recovering in a basement cell. The military, unable to decide whether he is an asset or a threat, has locked him in irons beneath a courthouse. Mikasa visits him. Armin visits him. Captain Levi visits him, briefly, and looks at him with the flat, appraising expression of a man choosing a knife to take into a fight. And then a girl visits him. Her name in this scene is Krista Lenz. She is small and blonde and gentle, the way certain people in stories are written to be gentle, so that the reveal of what they are actually carrying lands harder. Krista Lenz is not her real name. Her real name is Historia Rice. She is the last surviving daughter of the royal line that the boy's father once destroyed in a chapel beneath a chapel. She does not know any of this yet. He does not know it yet either. They simply sit together for a few minutes, two children of bad parents in a small, dim cell, and they do not say much. The story plants this scene like a long fuse, friend. It will not detonate for years, but hold it. The boy who was raised to seek revenge against Titans is sitting across from the girl whose family was wiped out by his father in order to give him the Titan power he carries. Each of them, in some sense, owes the other a wound. Neither of them is told. The fuse waits. In the meantime, the boy goes back to war. The next 2 years of Eren Yeager's life, friend, are the years of revelation. The story moves quickly through them, because there are too many revelations to hold them all at narrative speed. We will move only a little less quickly here, because each revelation tightens the noose around the word revenge. First, the female Titan, a creature that hunts Survey Corps soldiers in a forest, that kills more of Levi's elite squad than any single enemy in the manga has yet killed, that the soldiers eventually capture and crystallize, and that turns out to be a girl. A girl Eren has trained beside. A girl who once braided Mikasa's hair, in a manner of speaking. Her name is Annie Leonhardt. She has been a Titan all along. She has been one of them all along. The Titans, the story says quietly, are not all from outside. Second, the breach of Wall Rose, a campaign in the countryside, a battle in a ruined castle, and the awful slow understanding that 2 more of Eren's classmates, Rainer Braun and Bertolt Hoover, the steady older brother and the soft-voiced friend, are the armored Titan and the colossal Titan. The armored Titan is the creature that smashed open Wall Maria 5 years ago. The colossal Titan is the creature that, even more recently, kicked open the gate of Trost. The 2 boys who once shared bread with Eren and Armin and Mikasa in the trainee cafeteria are the 2 boys who killed his mother and his country. They have been one of them all along. The Titans, the story says, are not even strangers. The Titans have always been sleeping in the next bed. Third, and this, friend, is the revelation that begins to take revenge apart in his hands, is the night in the forest in which Reiner asks Eren to come with them. You should picture this. Two boys in a clearing, surrounded by trees. One of them has just transformed 10 minutes earlier into the armored Titan. The other is sitting in the dirt, bound, his hands tied behind him. The first boy, Reiner, is much larger than his 15-year-old body would suggest. The first boy is exhausted. The first boy looks at Eren with the kind of grief that the listener does not yet have a word for, and the first boy says, paraphrased, friend, the line is famous, that he understands now that he was a soldier all along, that the assignment he was given as a child was to come to this island and kill its people, and that he should not have forgotten that. He says that he had pretended, for years, that he was a regular trainee. He says that he had let himself believe it. He says that it had been easier than the alternative. He says he is sorry. He says, in the same breath, that they will be taking Eren back with them now. What is the listener to do with this scene? What is Eren to do with it? The boy he has trained beside for 3 years, the boy whose secret has just turned out to be the murder of his country, is also a boy. The hatred Eren has carried since the day on the street is supposed to land somewhere, and the place it has landed, onto these two soldiers in the clearing, does not hold the weight. They are not monsters. They are also monsters. They are soldiers. They are children. They are murderers. They are also victims. The Titans, the story is now telling him very clearly, were people. The people who became Titans were children. The children were sent here from somewhere. The somewhere has a name. The name is Mali. The name has a flag and an army and a foreign policy and a propaganda ministry and a system of internment camps for the people who happen to share Eren's blood. The word revenge has begun, slowly, to swallow itself. You cannot avenge your mother on a 15-year-old who was told, when he was 8 years old, by an adult in a uniform, that her death would prove him a hero of his people. You can want to, you can try to, but the wanting, when you try to use it, becomes thinner under your hand. The boy is 15. The boy did not choose. The Titan that ate your mother was a woman. The woman did not choose either. The cycle, the story is now telling Eren, does not have a beginning that you can punish. He does not, at this moment in the manga, give up the word. He clings to it. He fights Reiner. He does not go quietly. The survey corps rescues him. Bertolt and Reiner escape. There is more war ahead. There is, in fact, a great deal more war ahead. But the seed of doubt is planted. In the year the forest of giant trees burns, that the thing he has been doing all along may not be what he has been doing all along. The seed will be allowed, for 2 more years, to grow without his attending to it. He will be busy. The world will not allow him to sit with it. Then, 2 years later, in the basement under his own house, the seed will become a tree. We have spoken, friend, in the previous chapter, of the basement. We have spoken of the 3 journals. We have spoken of the wider world. In this chapter, in the matter of revenge, we must speak of the journals again, but only for a different reason. We must speak of what the journals did to the word. The first journal of Eren Yeager was the story of his childhood. He had been born in a place called the Liberio Internment Zone, a walled district at the edge of the city of Maraleberg in the Empire of Mali, where all the Eldians who had not made it to the island lived under armbands. He had a little sister. Her name was Faye. She was the closest person in his life. One day, when he was a small boy, he and Faye snuck out of the internment zone to look at an airship. They were caught by 2 Malian officers. The officers, to teach Grisha a lesson, to amuse themselves, to do what the Empire trained its officers to do to its subject people, fed Faye to a pack of dogs. Faye died screaming. Grisha did not. This is the story Eren reads in the basement, friend. The first thing he reads, after a lifetime of believing his father was a soft, sad, secretive doctor who walked through a gate every morning and came home for dinner, is the story of his father, at the age of 9, watching a child he loved die because 2 men in uniforms decided it would be funny. The story continues. Grisha grew up. Grisha joined an underground resistance. Grisha was caught. Grisha was tortured. Grisha was supposed to be sent to the island of Paradise, where the Empire of Mali had been turning captured Eldian rebels into pure titans and dropping them onto the walls for over a century. As a deterrent, the Empire said, against the day that the bloodline of the old Empire might rise again. Grisha was supposed to be one of those titans. He was, in fact, the only one on the night of his deportation who escaped that fate, because a spy called Eren Yeager gave him the attack titan instead and sent him into the walls with a mission. The mission was to take the founding titan from the royal family inside the walls. The mission was to use it against Mali. The mission was, in its broadest sense, the avenging of Eren Yeager and of every other Eldian child who had ever been fed to dogs because two men in uniforms decided it would be funny. Grisha did the mission. Grisha entered the walls. Grisha married, second, a kind woman named Carla and had a son named Eren, named, by the way, after Eren Yeager, the spy who had given him the power. Grisha taught the son to look at the world a particular way. Grisha did not tell the son why. Grisha kept the journals locked in a basement. Then, the night the wall fell, Grisha did what he had been sent to do. He went to the chapel of the Rice family. He killed Frida. He ate her power. He came home. He found his son in the forest. And he passed everything he had, both titans, the attack and the founder, the entire mission, the entire weight of Eren Yeager's death, and every Eldian death after it, to a child who had not asked for any of it. Eren reads this in the basement at the age of 15. This is what the word revenge looks like, friend, when it has had 100 years to grow. His father avenged his sister by destroying a family of children he did not know. His father avenged his sister by handing the work to a son too young to refuse it. His father avenged his sister by setting in motion, knowingly or not, a cycle that would end with 80% of the world dead. His father, and the boy who reads the journals in the basement, must understand this slowly, because the basement is full of dust, and the lamplight is low, and the truth is heavy. His father did not avenge anyone. His father added Frida Rice to the list of dead children. His father added Eren to the list of children too young to know what they were being handed. His father had, in trying to repay the Empire of Mali for the murder of his sister, only repeated the Empire of Mali. The cycle does not have a beginning. The cycle does not have a punishment. The cycle has only repeaters. Eren closes the journal. In the slow, quiet weeks that follow this discovery, friend, the story almost stops moving. The Survey Corps returns to Wall Rose with a wagon load of paper and a head full of new vocabulary. The military council meets. Foreign nations are named for the first time. Maps that no one had seen before are unfolded on long tables. The world has been a smaller place in the heads of these soldiers for 100 years. The world is, suddenly, much larger. Eren does not speak much in these weeks. He sits in a chair, looking at the floor. He reads the journals again, and a third time. He goes to Historia Reese, who has now stepped forward as queen, and asks for a particular favor. He asks her to touch his hand. He does not, in this scene, explain why. She touches it. Nothing visible happens. But what happens, internally, is that Eren, who has the Attack Titan's gift of foresight, who can see the memories of every future inheritor, uses her royal blood, just for a moment, to crack open the gift fully. He sees the future. He sees, friend, what he will do. He sees the rumbling. He sees the coffee shop in Liberio. He sees the trampled cities. He sees the dead. He sees the rooftop. He sees Mikasa on top of his last form. He sees the bird at the grave. He sees all of it, in the way one sees a film projected on a wall. From the outside, with no power to step inside the projection and change anything. He sees that the thing he has been raised to think of as revenge, the killing of the Titans, the protection of his people, the long completion of an oath made on a broken street, is going to end in something that no language of revenge can hold. He is going to kill the world. Not because the world killed his mother. The world did not kill his mother. A 19-year-old woman called Dina Fritz killed his mother, and Dina Fritz had once been his father's first wife, and Dina Fritz had been forced into a Titan body by the Empire of Mali, and Dina Fritz had, and this, friend, is the worst of it, the thing the listener may want a moment to absorb, been guided to that particular kitchen, on that particular afternoon, by the will of Eren himself, reaching back across the paths from the year 854 to the year 845, ensuring that his own mother would die in the way she died, so that the boy in the street would become the man he needed to become. He killed his mother. He killed his mother to make himself. He killed his mother to make sure he would grow up to kill the world. This is not, friend, a metaphor. This is what the manga shows us. In chapter 139, in the scene the readers have argued about more than they have argued about anything else in the entire ending. Eren, in the paths, confesses it to Armin. He sent the smiling Titan to the kitchen. He chose his own origin story. He chose the broken street. He chose the screaming. He chose the oath. He chose the boy he became. He chose, in other words, to be the kind of person who would feel that there was no alternative to the thing he was about to do. The word revenge, friend, cannot survive this. Revenge is what someone does when something has been taken from them. Revenge is what the wounded do to the world that wounded them. Revenge is a word that requires an outside, a wound from somewhere else, a hand that struck the first blow that you are now returning. Eren has no outside. The wound was his own. The first blow was his. The hand that struck his mother in the kitchen was, by a long looping road through the attack titan's strange gift, his own. You cannot avenge yourself on yourself. You can do other things. You can punish yourself. You can hate yourself. You can carry yourself the way a man carries a corpse he murdered. But you cannot avenge. The word has nowhere to land. The boy in the street in Shiganshina, friend, did not know any of this. The boy in the street simply screamed and swore and held an oath in his small fists like a stone. The boy did not know that, in the country of Ymir Fritz, in the timeless paths of the founding Titan, a future version of him was reaching backwards through the years and arranging the moment exactly. The boy did not know that the Titan that ate his mother had been guided to the kitchen by his own future will. The boy did not know that he was, in some sense, the architect of his own grief. The story does not tell him for many years. The story does not tell us for many more. But when it tells us, friend, the word revenge, which has carried the entire engine of the boy's life for 9 years, cracks open in the listener's hand and turns out to have been hollow the whole time. There was never an enemy outside him to repay. There was only himself, in 2 different decades, doing the same thing to himself twice. We must spend, friend, a moment on what happens to the listener in this revelation, because what happens to the listener is, in some sense, the heart of why this story has survived as long as it has, and the reason a Mr. K-Law episode about a fictional teenager is worth telling at all. You, the listener, came to the story because of revenge. You stayed for the same reason. The first season of Attack on Titan, the first 30 chapters of the manga, are constructed almost entirely around the moral simplicity of a boy whose mother was eaten. Titans bad. Boy good. Boy kill Titans. Boy avenge mother. You signed onto a contract the day you read the first chapter that said, this is a story about justice. This is a story about a wronged child setting the world right. The story spends 100 chapters tearing the contract up. By the time you reach the basement, the contract is no longer enforceable. The Titans were people. The people were victims. The victims were soldiers. The soldiers were children. The children were sent here by a government. The government was protecting its citizens from a memory. The memory was an empire that had once oppressed everyone. The empire had been founded by a slave girl in a forest 2,000 years ago. The slave girl had been raped. The man who raped her was buried. His grave was old. His grandchildren had grandchildren. The world had moved on. The world had not moved on. And then, and this is the part that, in the year after the manga ended, broke a generation of readers in half. The boy you came to the story to follow announces, with full knowledge of all of the above, that he intends to kill almost every person on the earth. You, the listener, are asked a question by the story, in that moment. The question is, do you still want him to win? The story is honest enough not to answer for you. It shows the killing. It shows the trampling. It shows the refugee camps. It shows Eldian children in internment zones dying under the feet of wall titans because the wind happened to blow the dust of an Eldian child into the same sky as the dust of a Malian one. It refuses to soften any of it. It refuses to give you the satisfaction of pretending that the rumbling was a surgical strike. The rumbling, the story says clearly, was omnidirectional. It killed the guilty. It killed the innocent. It killed the people the boy loved. It killed the people the boy was supposed to be saving. It killed everyone who happened to live in its way. And then, after it has shown you all of this, the story asks you the question again. Do you still want him to win? Do you still recognize him? Is the boy in the street, the boy in the dirt, the boy in the trafficker cabin, the boy who gave away his scarf, is he still inside the man on top of the End Titan, ordering the world to be flattened? The story refuses to tell you. The fan response to this refusal, friend, has been the longest and loudest argument in modern anime fandom. There are listeners who, even now, 5 years after the manga ended, will defend the rumbling as a tragic necessity, as the only honest exit from a 100-year corner. There are listeners who, with equal conviction, will call it the moral collapse of a protagonist they once loved. There are listeners somewhere in the middle who will simply say that they do not know, that they have never known, that the manga did not let them know on purpose. And there is the author. Hajime Isayama has spoken about Eren more often than most authors speak about their protagonists. He has said, in interviews, and I will paraphrase, friend, because the lines are quoted in many places and they belong to him, that Eren is a character who reflects the worst parts of himself. He has said that the manga was, in some sense, a way of getting rid of those worst parts. He has said that he wanted to write a story where the victim becomes the perpetrator, because that, in his view, was the most honest thing he could do with the kind of grief his characters were carrying. He has said, more recently, that he regrets a sense of insincerity in some of the final beats. He has been hard on himself in public, the way few authors are. He has not, in any of these statements, told you what the rumbling means. He has, instead, refused to tell you. He has refused even to tell himself. He has said that he considered, at one point, an ending in which Eren completed the rumbling fully, wiped out 100% of the world, and decided against it, not because he was afraid of it, but because, in the version where Eren stops at 80%, the question of what kind of man Eren was can still be asked. In the 100% version, the question closes. The boy becomes a villain. The story becomes a warning. In the 80% version, the boy remains until the very last page. The boy in the street, the boy in the dirt, the boy who once gave away his scarf. The boy is still in there. The villain is also in there. The two of them are wearing the same body. The reader is asked to look at them both at once. This is what the word revenge becomes, in the end, in the story of Eren Yeager. It becomes a question. It becomes the question of whether, when the cycle has no beginning, any blow you strike inside it can be called a return blow at all. It becomes the question of whether the boy in the street had any other word available to him on the afternoon his mother was eaten. It becomes the question of whether you, the listener, would have used a different word in his place. It becomes the question of whether you, sitting tonight in a room with a soft light on, in a country that is at peace, or perhaps not at peace, are not also, in your small daily ways, carrying the same word in your pocket. The story does not let you off. The story does not let any of us off. The boy held the word for 9 years. The word held him back. The word turned out, in the end, to be a mirror. He looked into the mirror. He saw himself. There is, friend, a moment we should hold quietly before this chapter closes. It is the moment, in the basement, when Eren has finished reading the journals for the 3rd time. It is night. The lamp is low. The other soldiers have gone upstairs. Eren is alone in the dust, sitting on a wooden crate, with 3 small books on the floor beside him. He has been crying earlier in the day. He is not crying now. He is doing something quieter than that. He is, the story implies without telling us, thinking about his mother, not the kitchen, not the rubble, not the smile of the Titan. He is thinking about a different memory, much smaller, much harder to reach. He is thinking about a morning in their kitchen, years before any of this, when Carla packed his lunch and told him to put his coat on and ruffled his hair on his way out the door. He is thinking about a woman who told him, more than once, that he was special simply for being born. He is thinking about a woman who did not need him to do anything else with his life, to deserve to be alive in it. That woman is gone. That woman has been gone for 9 years. The woman did not need to be avenged. The woman, in the small, unfinished sentence she shouted at him from beneath a beam in a broken kitchen on a broken street, told him not to do this with his life. The boy did not hear her, or the boy heard her and did not believe her. The boy spent the next 9 years building, on top of her death, an oath she would have begged him not to take. And now, in a basement, in a town that has been retaken, in a war that has just doubled in size, in a body that has been turned into a weapon by his own father, the boy understands. The oath was not for her. The oath was for him. The killing of the Titans, the joining of the Survey Corps, the long fight across a continent, the loss of his friends one by one. All of it, in the end, was something he did to himself to keep his mother in the room. As long as he was avenging her, she was still close enough to be avenged. As long as he had an enemy, she was not completely gone. The moment the enemy turned out to be a person, the moment the enemy turned out to be himself, the moment the cycle turned out to be unending, in that moment, the boy lost his mother all over again. He lost her, friend, not on the street. He lost her in the basement, in lamplight, in dust, in silence. He set down the third journal. He went upstairs. He did not, after that day, speak again about revenge. Not to Armin, not to Mikasa, not to anyone. The word, which had carried him for 9 years, simply fell out of his vocabulary. The thing inside him that the word had named was still there. It had only grown too large to be named. What it became, in its growing, what the boy chose to do with it in the years that followed, is the matter of the third pillar of his life, and of the next chapter of this episode. We will speak, friend, of prophecy. We will speak of the gift his father gave him, without asking. We will speak of the moment, at the age of 15, when he saw his own future, and could not unsee it, and decided, quietly, in a basement, with no one watching, to walk toward it. There is a kind of haunting, friend, that the old stories do not have a word for. In the old stories, the dead haunt the living. A ghost walks the upper hallway of a manor house. A spirit waits at a crossroads for a traveler who reminds her of someone she once loved. The dead, in the old stories, are behind us, and they reach forward to brush the back of our necks with their fingers, and we shiver, and we say that the room has gone cold, and we move on. In the story we are telling tonight, the haunting moves in the other direction. In the story we are telling tonight, the living haunt the living. A boy in the year 854 reaches backward across the years and lays his hand on the shoulder of a man in the year 845. The man is the boy's father. The man has not yet met the woman who will become the boy's mother. The man is, in the moment of the touch, only 30-something years old, and he is in a chapel beneath a chapel, and he is holding a knife, and he does not know, yet, that the small voice in the back of his head is the voice of a son he has not yet had. The man hears the voice. The man does what the voice asks. The voice goes quiet again, and waits for 9 more years to pass, and then it begins, very slowly, to wake up in the boy from whom it has always been coming. This is the gift the story calls the Attack Titan. This is the curse the story calls foresight. This is the haunting that begins long before the haunted is born and ends, eventually, with the haunted choosing, knowingly, with both eyes open, to become the ghost. We will spend this chapter, friend, on prophecy. We will spend it on the strange, looping way a single child became the cause of his own origin, the recipient of his own warnings, and the executor of his own end. We will spend it gently. The mechanics are difficult. The mournful part is not. By the end of the chapter, we will have arrived at the moment, in a basement in Shiganshina, when a 15-year-old boy saw the rest of his life laid out in front of him in detail and decided that he would walk into it anyway. We will begin in the chapel. The chapel was beneath a chapel. This is the kind of architectural fact, friend, that the manga gives you in passing and that you carry with you forever afterwards, because the shape of the building is the shape of what the building is hiding. There was, in the country of Walsina, on the estate of the Race family, a small place of worship. It was a country chapel. It had wooden pews. It had a stone floor. It had a quiet bell, which was rung on holidays, and a quiet priest, who said the right words at the right times, and a quiet congregation, which numbered no more than 30 on the loudest of feast days. Beneath the country chapel, friend, was a second chapel. You reached it through a door in the floor behind the altar. You walked down a long stone staircase. The staircase smelled of damp. The walls were lined with rough-cut blocks, the kind of stones that the slow water of underground rivers will eat at, century after century, until the rooms above them sit on nothing. At the bottom of the staircase, the second chapel opened. It was much larger than the chapel above it. It had no pews. It had no altar. It had, instead, a single great chamber, cathedral tall, the ceiling so far up that the lamps the family carried in their hands could not, by their light, find it. This is where the founding Titan had been passed, from royal to royal, for over a century. The Race family, descendants by a sideways line of the original king who had built the walls, kept their secret here. Every generation, when the holder of the founder was near death, the next generation was brought down the long staircase, in their best clothes, and the older one ate, and the younger one inherited. The chamber was where the family ate itself. The chamber was where the power was kept. The chamber was the room that the kingdom did not know was beneath its feet. On the day the wall fell, in the year 845, the Reese family came down the staircase. They had heard by messenger that Shiganshina was under attack. They were not unduly worried. The walls had stood for a century. The walls would stand for another century. But Rod Reese, the senior member of the line, brought his family down to the second chapel anyway, for a precaution. His daughter Frida, who had inherited the founder 3 years earlier, was with him. So was Frida's younger sister, a small girl named Historia, who would later go by the name Krista Lenz in a trainee barracks, and whom we have already met. The family stood in the center of the chamber. The lamps burned. They waited. A man came down the staircase. The man's name was Eren Yeager. He was a doctor. He carried a knife. He had been sent on a mission by a dying spy to take the founding Titan from this family by force. He had not, until this evening, intended to do it. He had spent 5 years inside the walls failing to do it. He had married, had a son, had built a small medical practice in Shiganshina, had let the mission slide further and further away from himself. He had hoped, in the way that men hope, that the mission would die quietly inside him and let him be a doctor. On this night, with Shiganshina burning behind him, the mission woke up. Grisha walked into the center of the chamber. He showed himself to the family. He told Frida Rice, paraphrased friend, that she was bound by the vow of the first king of the walls to renounce war, and that this vow was the reason she would not act to save the people of Paradise, even as Shiganshina was being eaten. He begged her to use the founder anyway. He told her she was the only hope of her people. He did not in the manga present himself as a threat at first. He presented himself as a doctor with a knife and a request. Frida refused. She was 16 years old. She had inherited the founder when she was 13. She had been bound since the inheritance by the will of a long-dead king who had vowed never again to use the power of the Titans for war. She did not, herself, want to use it. She had no desire to use it. The vow lived in her like a second pulse, and she could not, in good faith, even hold the wish to break it. Grisha drew his knife. Frida transformed. What follows, friend, is a fight in a cathedral-tall chamber between two titans the size of buildings. It is not a long fight. Grisha had inherited the attack titan from a man called Eren Yeager, whose own combat experience had been long and brutal. Frida had inherited the founding titan 3 years earlier, and had used it, in those 3 years, almost not at all. She had erased her younger sister's memory of their meetings, on a handful of occasions. That was it. She did not know how to fight. Grisha did. Grisha overpowered her in less than a minute. Grisha, in his titan form, lifted Frida's smaller titan body and bit through her nape. He ate her, he inherited the founder, and then he turned to the rest of the family. This is the moment, friend, that the manga gives us with unusual cruelty. Grisha, the soft-faced doctor, the man who married Carla, the man who walked through the gate every morning carrying a leather case. Grisha stood in the center of the chamber, in the body of a 15-meter titan, and he looked at the children of the Rice family. There were several of them. They were younger than Frida. They had nothing to do with the empire, or the cycle, or the vow. They were simply children of a particular bloodline, standing in the wrong chamber on the wrong evening. Grisha did not want to kill them. The manga is very clear about this. It shows us his face, in the titan, distorted by the strange transformation of his body, but visibly anguished. It shows us his hesitation. He had killed Frida because Frida had transformed first, and the fight had been a fight. The children were not a fight. The children were children. He had a daughter once. He had a sister once. He could see, in their faces, both. He stalled, and the voice came. The voice of his son. The voice of Eren Yeager. The voice of a child who had not yet been born, reaching back across 9 years through the strange gift of the attack titan, into the body of the man who would become his father, asking him to do the thing. You should hold this for a moment, friend. You should sit with the strangeness of it. A man in a chamber under a chapel, in the year 845, with the blood of a teenage girl on his face, hearing inside his own head the voice of a child he has not yet sired, telling him to finish what he started, telling him about the friends he, the father, will never meet, telling him about a sister called Faye, who has been dead in his memory for 30 years, and reminding him that Faye was killed too, telling him that the children in this chamber will become, if they live, the inheritors of a vow that will keep the Eldians on Paradise caged forever, telling him that this is what he came here to do, telling him to do it. Grisha, the soft-faced doctor, the man who walked through a gate every morning, did it. He crushed the children of the Rice family. He killed almost all of them. He spared one, on the voice's instruction. The spared one was the small girl, Historia, who was at that moment huddled behind a cracked stone, and whom the voice told him would be needed alive in the future. He left her. He turned. He walked, in his titan form, back up the long staircase and out of the chapel, under the chapel, and into the night. He went looking for his son. He found Eren in the forest outside the Broken District. He found him with a titan serum, the same kind of serum the Empire of Mali used to turn its Eldian prisoners into pure titans, and one titan more, the attack and the founder, both, locked inside himself, ready to be passed on. He injected his son. He waited. The serum turned Eren into a pure titan, a mindless creature with the body of a titan and the mind of a sleeping animal. The pure titan ate his father. Inheritance complete. The attack titan and the founding titan both passed, in that one bite, into a 15-year-old boy who would not, for 5 years, remember any of it. And the voice, friend, was satisfied. The voice went quiet for 9 years. The voice waited for the boy to catch up. You may, listening to this, want to stop me. You may want to ask, how can a voice from 9 years in the future tell a man, in the past, to do something? How can the future cause the past? Is that not, by every law of cause and effect that you and I were raised with, impossible? The answer the story gives, friend, is yes, and also no. The attack titan, in the world of Attack on Titan, is one of 9 inherited powers, descended from Ymir Fritz 2,000 years ago. Each of the 9 has its own particular gift. The colossal titan is enormous. The armored titan is durable. The female titan can mimic. The jaw titan is fast. The Beast Titan throws. The Cart Titan is enduring. The Warhammer Titan can crystallize. The Founder is sovereign. And the Attack Titan, the power Grisha passed to Eren, the power that gives this anime its name, has, as its strangest gift, a particular relationship with time. The Attack Titan can see the memories of the future. Each inheritor of the Attack Titan can see, on occasion, in dreams or in moments of contact with another inheritor's power, the memories of the next person who will hold the Attack Titan after them. And in seeing those memories, they can also, sometimes, send their own will backward to the previous holder. Eren Kruger, the spy who held the Attack Titan before Grisha, knew the names Mikasa Ackerman and Armin Arlert before either child had been born, because he had read them in his own mind, in the memories of the man who would hold the power after him. Grisha, in turn, could see fragments of Eren's future. Eren, when his power awakened, could see backward, to Grisha, to Kruger, to every Attack Titan that had ever lived. The chain ran both ways. This is the thing, friend, the new listener has to sit with for a long moment to absorb. The chain ran both ways. The future could speak to the past. Not freely, not at any moment of its choosing, only through the bodies of the inheritors, only through the strange seam where one mind crossed into another. But the chain ran both ways, and once you accept that the chain ran both ways, the entire architecture of Eren's life rearranges itself. The boy did not become a monster in the year 854 because of what happened to him as a child. The boy became a monster in the year 854 and then reached backward through the chain to arrange what happened to him as a child. He sent his father to the chapel. He sent his father's first wife, Dina Fritz, to the kitchen. He arranged his own mother's death. He arranged his own oath in the street. He arranged the boy in the dirt. The boy in the dirt thought he was choosing freely. The boy in the dirt was a marionette, and the strings ran forward through the years to a 19-year-old man on top of an End Titan who was pulling them with both hands. This is the haunting, friend. This is the prophecy. The prophecy was not given to Eren by a god or a witch or a star. The prophecy was given to Eren by Eren, and the Eren who gave it was the same Eren who received it. And the boy could not, no matter how hard he tried, point at any outside force and call it the author of his suffering. He was, in some sense, the only author. He was also, in some sense, the only victim. And the gap between those two roles, the gap that, in most stories, opens cleanly so that the listener can take a side, in this story, in Eren Yeager's story, never opens at all. We must speak, friend, of how this looks from inside the boy's head. The story does not show us the moment when Eren first sees the future. It implies it. It plants the implication early, and lets the implication grow, and only confirms it in the very last chapters, in a long conversation between Eren and Armin, inside the paths. But the manga does, by the time you have finished it, let you reconstruct the timeline. It is, broadly, this. When Eren is 15, two things happen in close succession. First, he plugs the gate at Trost, in his new Titan form. Second, he survives. The military, unsure of what he is, locks him in a basement cell and considers killing him. He is rescued from that consideration by Commander Erwin Smith. He is conscripted into the Survey Corps. He fights, over the following 2 years, in a series of escalating battles. He is captured by Reiner and Bertolt. He is rescued. He is captured by Rod Reese and Kenny Ackerman. He is rescued. He is sent back to fight again. He is, in this period, exactly what he appears to be, a brave, stubborn, slightly traumatized boy soldier, doing his duty. Then, in the year 850, the Survey Corps takes Shiganshina back. The basement is opened. The journals are read. The truth of the wider world comes out. The Survey Corps returns to Wall Rose, with the world having doubled in size, and the war about to begin in a different direction altogether. And Eren, in the slow, quiet weeks that follow, does the thing he will later confess to Armin in the paths. He goes to Historia Reese. He asks her to touch his hand. She does, and in that moment, friend, with her royal blood briefly cracking open the founder inside him, Eren sees. He sees the future, not in vague fragments, in detail. He sees the years to come laid out in front of him with the clarity of a film projected on a wall. He sees the 4-year time skip. He sees the day he cuts off his own leg and gouges out his own eye to infiltrate the Mali military. He sees the coffee shop in Liberia. He sees Reiner across the table. He sees Willie Tiber on the stage. He sees the festival. He sees himself transform in the middle of the civilian crowd. He sees the children he will crush underfoot. He sees more. He sees the rumbling. He sees the wall titans walking. He sees the foreign cities flattened. He sees the trampled refugee camps. He sees Eldians in internment zones dying under feet that were supposed to be marching for their salvation. He sees the war between Eldia and the world. He sees his friends turning on him. He sees the airship. He sees the alliance of his former enemies. He sees Gabby Braun on the rail bridge. He sees the bullet. He sees his head separating from his body. He sees his last Titan form, the End Titan, the centipede-spined skeleton, the largest creature anyone in the world will ever have seen, rising from the rubble. He sees the battle on top of it. He sees Mikasa entering its mouth. He sees Mikasa, the girl he gave a scarf to when she was 9 years old, reaching for him with a knife in her hand. He sees the kiss. He sees the head, his head, being carried in her arms across the sea. He sees the grave under the tree. He sees the bird. He sees all of it, friend, at the age of 15, in a small room on Historia Reese's estate, in the year 850. And he has, after that day, 4 years of his life left. What does a 15-year-old do with that knowledge? We have, in the next few minutes of this chapter, to sit with that question more honestly than we sit with most questions, because it is, in some sense, the deepest question the story is asking. It is not asking, primarily, whether the rumbling is justified. It is asking what a person does, when they are very young, with the knowledge of their own future evil. The boy has options. The first option is to refuse. He could, in theory, decide on that day, in the year 850, to do exactly the opposite of everything he has seen. He could decide not to go to Mali. He could decide not to cut off his leg. He could decide not to sit across from Reiner in a coffee shop. He could decide, in defiance of the vision, to do nothing. The problem with this option, the story implies, is that the vision is not a vision of one possible future. The vision is a vision of the future that has, by the Attack Titan's strange relationship with time, already happened. The future, in the Attack Titan's gift, is not a maybe. The future is a memory, the memory of the holder who will come after him, looking back. The boy's future self has already lived these scenes. They are, in some sense, fixed. Refusing would only mean, the boy understands, that he would walk into them more confused. The scenes would happen anyway. He would simply arrive at them unprepared. The second option is to accept. To say, very young, very tired, very alone in a basement room on a country estate, that this is who he is going to be. To take the visions as a curriculum, to prepare, to learn, slowly, how to do the thing he has seen himself doing, to become the man the future already remembers. The third option, friend, and this is the one the story does not let us see clearly, the one the listeners argue about most, is to try, within the fixed shape of the future, to make the future do the most good it can. The boy has seen the rumbling. The boy cannot prevent the rumbling, but the boy can, perhaps, calibrate it. He can choose to stop it at 80% rather than 100. He can choose to leave his friends alive on top of the End Titan. He can choose to let Mikasa be the one with the knife. He can choose, in the small spaces between the fixed scenes, what kind of man is wearing his face when the scenes arrive. This is the option, friend, that he seems to take. We cannot be sure. The manga does not tell us in clean terms, but the manga does tell us, by the end, in his last conversation with Armin in the Paths, that he was operating on this principle. He calls himself, in that conversation, a slave to freedom, a phrase the listener may want to hold for a moment, because it contains, in 5 words, the entire architecture of his life. The freedom he wanted, the freedom he reached for, the freedom he eventually claimed, It became, by the end, a master that he served. He was free because he had to be. He was free because there was no alternative. He was free because the future had told him he would be free, and he had no choice but to obey it. Slave to freedom. It is the kind of paradox, friend, that the old chroniclers used to write at the end of tragedies, when they had run out of better words. We should pause here and look at something the manga did, in its handling of this material, that very few stories of its scale ever do. It refused to tell us whether the boy had a choice. It could have. It would have been easier if it had. A cleaner story would have come down on one side or the other. Either Eren Yeager freely chose to commit genocide and is therefore a villain whose final beheading is a just punishment, or Eren Yeager was a marionette of the time loop, a puppet on his own strings, and is therefore a tragic figure whose rumbling was inevitable and whose death is the cruelest joke time can play on a young man. Either reading would satisfy half the audience. Neither reading would do justice to the boy. The manga did neither. The manga kept both readings open. It gave us, in the same scene, evidence for free will and evidence for predestination. Eren confesses, in chapter 139, that he wanted to do the rumbling, that there was a part of him that desired it, that he was not, in his own words, forced into it by circumstance, that he harbored the wish to harm. That is the free will half of the answer. He also says, in the same scene, that he saw the future and walked toward it because he could see no alternative. He says he was made to do it by his future self. He says he was a slave to freedom. That is the predestination half. The two halves do not resolve. Hajime Isayama has spoken about this directly, friend. He has said in interviews that he made the choice deliberately. He has said, paraphrasing because the lines belong to him, that he wanted to write a story in which the protagonist became the perpetrator, in which the boy who was wronged became the man who wronged, in which the line between cause and effect blurred until it could not be sorted out. He has said in his most recent interviews, and this is the strange, hard-on-himself part of the man, the part of his career that has been quietly rare among writers of his stature, that he sometimes feels he handled the ending with insincerity. He has said that he is not sure he was honest enough. He has said that part of why Eren became what Eren became was his own immaturity as a writer in his early 20s. He has been, in public, harder on his own work than most of its critics have been. But the work itself, the published work, the manga the world will read for centuries, is not insincere on this question. The work is honest about its uncertainty. The work says, I do not know if the boy had a choice. The boy may not know either. You, the listener, will have to decide for yourself, in your own life, what it means to have looked into a basement of your own future and seen what you would do, and to have walked toward it anyway. This is the deepest thing prophecy does to Eren Yeager, friend. It is not that it tells him his future. It is that it makes him complicit in his future. It is that it makes him an author of the very thing he is the victim of. There is no clean ledger. There is no one to blame. There is only a boy in a basement, knowing what he is going to do and then doing it. We must spend a moment, friend, on the architecture of the paths. We have visited this country once before, in the first chapter, in the matter of freedom. We have seen Ymir Fritz there. We have seen Eren run across the pale sand to embrace her. We must, in the matter of prophecy, walk this country in a different direction, because the paths are the place where the haunting actually lives. The paths are the room where the boy, in the year 854, meets the man he became, and where the man speaks to the boy he was, and where the chain that runs both ways through time has its actual physical address. Picture, then, a country that does not exist on any map. It is mostly pale sand. The light is constant but sourceless. Not sunlight, not moonlight, but a soft glow that has no clear origin. Above the sand, in the sky, there are auroras, long, slow ribbons of bluish-green light that move the way auroras move in our own world's far north, but more slowly. They are the paths themselves, visible only here. Every subject of Ymir, every Eldian, every person descended from her in the 2,000 years since she first touched the source of all living matter, has a path. Every path connects, eventually, to the great tree at the center of the country. The tree is enormous, older than empires. Its roots reach down into something the manga calls the source of all organic matter, which is the same pool of water Ymir fell into when she became the first Titan. The tree is, in some sense, the architecture of life itself, given a single tall shape in a single quiet country. At the foot of the tree, when she is not elsewhere, Ymir Fritz lives. She is a child. She has been a child for 2,000 years. She carries a small wooden pail of water. She uses the water and the sand of the country to mold, on command, the bodies of the Titans in our world. Every time a soldier transforms, every time a regeneration is performed, every time a wall of hardened flesh appears in the real world, Ymir is the one doing the work. She has been doing it without rest for 20 centuries. She did not ask for the job. The job is part of her chains. Time in this country is not arranged the way time is arranged in ours. Eren Yeager, who is dragged into the country once, in the story, says, on his return, that he was not sure whether he had been there for a few moments, or for several years. He says the past, and the present, and the future move there in different ways. He says that 1 minute in the country can hold a memory of 1,000 years, and 1 century in the country can pass in the space of a single thought. This is the country, friend, where Eren spent the last 4 years of his short life, more and more, in the parts of his mind that the world outside could not see. When the manga gives us the late Eren, the cold Eren, the post-time-skip Eren, the Eren who sits across from Reiner in the coffee shop, and whose face the listener no longer entirely recognizes, what the manga is showing us, in some sense, is a boy whose body is in the world and whose mind is increasingly in the paths. He is hearing his father's voice in the chapel, ordering the killing of the race children. He is seeing his own future. He is, when he is alone, walking up the great tree's slow incline. He has not been here only once. He has been here many times. The paths are not for him a single visit. They are a country he has begun to live in, the way some people in our own world live increasingly in their own memories, or their own dreams, or their own fears. The boy in the basement, in the year 850, became, quietly, over the 4 years that followed, a boy who lived half in the paths. By the time he sat across from Reiner in the coffee shop, in the year 854, the boy in the world was a thin membrane. The real boy was in the country of pale sand, walking toward the tree, doing the work the future had handed him. This, friend, is the loneliness of prophecy. It does not happen to you all at once. It moves in slowly. It separates you, day by day, from the people around you. You begin to look at them with the strange, weighted gaze of someone who knows things they do not. You stop laughing at their jokes. You stop arguing with their plans. You stop, at last, even disagreeing with them. You agree quietly, because you know that the arguing will not change anything, and the time it would take to argue is time you no longer have to spare. Mikasa noticed it first. Armin noticed it second. Jean noticed it third. By the time he left for Mali, friend, the people who loved him had already, in some quiet way, lost him. We should speak, friend, of the moments inside the 4-year window when the cost of prophecy showed on his face. There are several. The manga gives us, throughout the post-time skip arc, brief glimpses of the boy still inside the man. He laughs once with Falco Grice in a Liberio hospital bed, and the laugh is genuine, and the listener flinches, because the laugh is genuine. He sits in a coffee shop with Reiner, and his hands shake. He stands in the dust of the trampled Malian capital, and looks at a child's small body in the street, and the manga lets us see his face for one panel, and the face is not the face of a hero, and it is not the face of a villain. It is the face of a young man who has just been forced, by his own hand, to do a thing he saw himself doing 4 years ago, and could not, in those 4 years, find a way to undo. There is a particular moment, in the basement under the Yeager house, very late in the manga, that I want to bring to your attention. The Survey Corps, after Eren's defection, has returned to Shiganshina. They have descended again into the basement. They are looking, this time, not for journals but for clues to what Eren has become. The basement is the same. The dust is the same. The lamp is the same. But there is now, on the wooden crate where Eren once sat, a small note in his hand. The note is short. The note is a goodbye. The Survey Corps reads it. The Survey Corps does not, in the manga, share the contents with us in full. The implication is that the note is, in some sense, an apology to the friends he is about to betray. He had written it before he left. He had known, when he left, that the people he loved would never see him again as he was. He had known that they would have to kill him. He had left them a small thing to find, when they came looking, so that they would understand, at the end, that he had not become this person, without knowing what becoming this person was costing. This is what prophecy does to you, friend. It does not make you cold. It does not make you cruel. It makes you kind, and exhausted, and quiet, and unable to share, with the people you love, the size of what you are carrying. You write small notes. You leave them in basements. You hope they will be enough. The basement, in Eren Yeager's story, is a recurring room. His father was tortured in a basement in Liberia before he was sent across the sea. His father kept 3 journals in a basement in Shiganshina for 20 years. His father killed the Reyes family in a basement beneath a chapel. Eren himself was held in a basement in Trost after he plugged the gate. Eren read the journals in his father's basement and saw the architecture of the lie his life had been built on. Eren left his goodbye note in that same basement 4 years later, before he went to Mali. The basement is, in the geography of the story, the room beneath the room. The room where the truth lives. The room you do not want to enter. The room you cannot stay out of. Prophecy, friend, is the basement of the mind. Once you have descended its long staircase, once you have seen what is kept beneath the lamp, you cannot, in any meaningful way, climb back up. You may go up. You may rejoin the world. You may eat dinner with your sister and laugh at your friend's joke. But the basement is still beneath you. It is always still beneath you. Everything you do above it, for the rest of your life, you do knowing what is in the room downstairs. There is, friend, a small fact about Eren Yeager that the manga drops in passing and that the careful listener should hold for a moment. It is the matter of his eyes. In the early chapters of the manga, Eren's eyes are bright green. They are the eyes of a stubborn child. They are the eyes that the cover art of the first volume showed the world. They were, for the first 10 years of the series, the iconic visual signature of the protagonist. After he inherits the founding titan, after Grisha eats Frida, briefly inherits the founder, and passes both titans to Eren in the woods, Grisha's own eyes, for a moment, turn purple. The manga gives us one panel of this, in flashback. It is a small visual detail. It is also, the careful reader notices, a sign. The founder marks its inheritors. Grisha's eyes turned purple briefly, because the founder was inside him. Eren's eyes never turn purple in the manga, but the careful reader notices, in the post-time skip arc, that they begin to be drawn differently. They are still green. The shape is the same, but the green is, somehow, less bright. The light in them is set deeper. They are, in some artistic sense, no longer the eyes of a child. They are the eyes of someone who has seen the future and walked toward it. This is the kind of small craft choice, friend, that the visual storytelling of Attack on Titan rewards on a second reading. The eyes are not the center of the story. The eyes are the place where the story leaks out, frame by frame, panel by panel, into the face of the boy. By the time he sits across from Reiner in the coffee shop, the green is still there, but the green has gone somewhere else. The boy is looking at Reiner, and Reiner is looking at the boy. And the listener, if the listener is paying attention to the eyes, can see that the boy is no longer entirely in the room. The boy is in the basement. The boy is in the paths. The boy is in the future, looking back at the conversation he is having now, with the same exhausted patience that an actor brings to the 100th performance of a play whose ending he has already memorized. We must, friend, before we close this chapter, return to the question we asked near the beginning, the question of choice. It is the deepest open question in the story. It is also, perhaps, the deepest open question in the lives of any of us who have ever felt, in our own small ways, that we were walking towards something the world had already arranged for us. Did the boy have a choice? The story refuses to answer. It gives us, instead, two things. It gives us the visions, the proof that the future was already known, and it gives us the confession, the proof that the boy desired what he did. The visions could be used by the boy as an excuse. He could say, "I had no choice. The future was fixed. My hand was forced." The confession could be used by his critics as a sentence. They could say, "You wanted to do this all along. The visions were merely the excuse you needed." Both arguments have textual support. Neither argument settles the matter. The manga makes sure of that. What the manga does instead, friend, is something stranger and more honest. It says, both are true. The boy was bound by the future. The boy desired the future. The freedom to refuse and the obligation to obey were the same act. The slave to freedom is also the master of his own chains. The chains are also the master of the boy. There is no clean ledger. There is only the boy in the basement, looking at the lamp, knowing what he will do, deciding, in the only way he can, to be the kind of man, when he does it, who can still recognize himself afterwards. I do not know, friend, whether that is enough. I do not know whether the listener, tonight, falling asleep to this voice, will decide that it is enough. I do not know whether the boy was redeemable. I do not know whether the boy was justified. I do not know whether, if any of us in our own lives were given the boy's gift, a vision of our own future cruelty, with no power to escape it, but the small power to choose the texture of the day we commit it, we would do any better. The story does not let me know. The story does not let any of us know. What the story does, friend, is set the boy down on the wooden crate in the basement, in lamplight, in dust, and ask us to look at him for a long, quiet moment. He is 15 years old. He has just seen the rest of his life. He has not told anyone. He will not, for almost 4 years, tell anyone. He will go upstairs in a few minutes. He will rejoin his friends. He will eat with them. He will smile at his sister. He will fight beside them. He will let them love him a little while longer. And then, in the year 854, he will go to the coffee shop in Liberio. He will sit across from Rainer Braun. He will let his hands shake. He will say what he has come to say. And the prophecy, friend, that began in a chapel, beneath a chapel, in the year 845, when a man with a knife heard the voice of his unborn son and did the thing the voice asked, will begin its final movement. The boy will become the thing he saw. He will become it, friend, knowingly. That is what makes him not a monster in the end, but something stranger and sadder. A monster acts in the dark. A villain acts in self-interest. The boy is acting in the light, fully informed, with full knowledge of the price. He has the future in one hand and the present in the other, and he is walking, carefully, between them. We will speak, in the next and final chapter, of what he does when he arrives. We will speak of the coffee shop. We will speak of the festival. We will speak of the rumbling. We will speak of the rooftop, and the airship, and the end titan, and the girl with the scarf and the knife. We will speak of the becoming. We will speak of what it means to be the boy who knew, and who walked there anyway, and who became, by the time he arrived, the largest threat the world had ever seen. But for now, friend, we will leave him in the basement, in lamplight, in dust, with his small future folded in his small hands. He is 15 years old. He knows. There is a coffee shop, friend, in a city that no longer exists. The city was called Liberio. It was the Eldian internment zone in the capital region of Mali, the great industrial empire across the sea from Paradis. Liberio was, in everything but the official name, a ghetto. Its streets were narrow. Its houses were tall and shabby and pressed close together, the way houses press close together in any neighborhood whose residents have been forbidden to spread beyond a fixed perimeter for 100 years. Its walls were not walls of stone, the way the walls of Paradis were stone, but they were walls all the same. Checkpoints, fences, armed guards at the gates, papers required to enter or leave. The Eldians inside Liberio wore armbands. The armbands marked them. The armbands separated them. On the street, from the citizens of Mali, who passed them every day without seeing them. In the corner of one of Liberio's quieter streets, on the ground floor of one of its tired buildings, there was a coffee shop. It served a thin, dark coffee. It served a pastry with a cherry in the middle. It was, by every measure, an unremarkable place. It had wooden chairs. It had wooden tables. It had a small bell on the door that rang when someone came in. The owner did not look up from his ledger when the bell rang, because looking up from the ledger every time the bell rang would have wasted hours of his life over the years, and the owner had decided long ago that his life was worth more than a glance. On a particular afternoon in the year 854, the bell rang. A young man came in. He was shabbily dressed, in the manner of a wounded soldier on convalescent leave. He wore an armband on what should have been the wrong arm before he was corrected. He had a slight beard. He had long hair tied back. He had bandages over half of his face. He limped, because one of his legs was made of wood, recently fitted. He went to a table near the window. He sat down. He ordered a coffee. He waited. He waited because, across the small distance of the coffee shop, at another table by the same window, another young man was sitting. The other young man was Rainer Braun. Rainer Braun, in the year 854, was 20 years old. He was a warrior of Mali. He held the power of the armored Titan. He was, by any measure that the Empire of Mali used to measure its servants, a hero. He had been sent to the island of Paradise 9 years earlier, as a child, alongside Bertolt Hoover and Annie Leonhardt, to recover the founding Titan from the island and bring it home. He had failed. He had pretended, for 3 of those 9 years, to be a regular trainee. He had eaten meals beside the boy he had been sent to destroy. He had laughed at the boy's jokes. He had told the boy more than once that the boy was like a younger brother to him. And then, in a forest in the year 850, he had revealed himself as the murderer of the boy's country, and had tried to take the boy back to Mali by force, and had failed in that too. Rainer Braun, friend, was a broken man at the age of 20. He had, on the afternoon we are describing, come to this coffee shop to be alone. He had ordered the same thin, dark coffee. He had taken the seat near the window. He was, when the limping young man came in, staring at the surface of the table. He did not look up. He was, in the small private theatre of his own head, somewhere else entirely, in a barracks perhaps, with 3 children who had once trusted him, or in a forest, with 2 of his squad mates being eaten in front of him by the Survey Corps, or in a different chair, in a different decade, deciding to be a soldier rather than a person. He did not see Eren Yeager sit down across from him. He did not see Eren Yeager, in fact, until Eren had been sitting across from him for several seconds, and when he saw him, when the long-haired young man with the bandaged face raised his eyes and looked directly into Rainer's, Rainer did not, at first, understand what he was looking at. The face was older, the hair was longer, the beard was new, the bandages covered half of what should have been recognizable, but the eyes, friend, were the eyes. Rainer's coffee cup fell out of his hand. It did not shatter. It rolled on the wooden surface of the table. The thin, dark coffee spread across the wood and into the lap of his trousers. Rainer did not look down. Rainer could not look down. Rainer was looking at a boy he had last seen 4 years earlier, on a battlefield in Shiganshina, in the moment he himself had collapsed into a pile of armored rubble, believing he had finally died. Rainer was looking at a ghost. The ghost was breathing. The ghost was ordering coffee. The ghost was, with the smallest possible smile on its face, asking the waiter for a second cup. This is the moment, friend, that the manga gives us with the kind of stillness that the listener has been waiting for since the journals were opened. It is the moment the story becomes, fully, the story of what happens when a hunter walks into the den of his prey at noon and sits down at the table and orders something to drink. It is the moment when the boy who plugged the gate of Trost in his Titan form is sitting in a chair in the empire that killed his mother's people, looking across a small table at the soldier who broke the wall, and choosing, in the absence of any obligation to act, simply to look at him. Eren did not transform. He did not raise his voice. He did not draw a weapon. He spoke to Reiner in a quiet, almost gentle tone, and what he said, paraphrased, friend, because the line belongs to the manga, was something like this. I understand you now. I understand why you did what you did. I understand because I am you. We are the same. We have always been the same. You were a soldier. I was a soldier. You were sent to do a thing. I am here, today, in this city, to do my thing. You came to the island. I came to the city. We did what we did because the people we love would die if we didn't. We are not enemies. We are mirrors. Reiner did not answer. Reiner sat in the coffee shop and listened, friend. And the boy he had once tried to kidnap, the boy he had once told he loved like a younger brother, told him calmly that what was about to happen would happen because nothing else could happen, and that he, Reiner, should not, when it began, feel guilty for the part he had played. They had both been used. They had both been children. They had both grown up doing terrible things because terrible things were what their respective empires had handed them, and they had not been strong enough, either of them, to refuse. It was the kindest thing Eren Yeager said in the post-time skip arc. It was also the prelude to one of the worst things he ever did. Because Eren had come to Liberio that afternoon, friend, not for coffee, and not for a conversation, and not even for Reiner. Eren had come to Liberio for a festival. The festival was being held that night. It was the Tiber family's great public event, the first time in a generation that the Tibers, who held the power of the Warhammer Titan and who served the Empire of Mali as a kind of aristocratic Eldian face, had spoken in public. Willie Tiber, the head of the family, was going to give a speech. The speech, every diplomat and every general and every foreign correspondent in the world had been told, would be historically important. The speech would change everything. The speech would, in fact, announce a war, a coordinated war, by the Empire of Mali and most of its allies, against the island of Paradis. Eren had read about the festival in the Liberio newspapers. Friend, weeks before he came, he had cut off his own leg and gouged out his own eye to be admitted to the Mali military hospital. He had pretended to be an amnesiac. He had befriended a small Eldian boy named Falco Grice, who corrected his armband and ran his messages and did not realize, for many weeks, who the wounded young soldier in the corner bed actually was. He had infiltrated the city of his enemies as patiently as any spy in the long history of espionage, and he had done it for one reason. He had come to be there, in person, on the night of the speech. He had come to make sure the speech ended differently than the speech was meant to end. That night, friend, the streets of Liberio were full. The Tiber family had built a great wooden stage in a public square. The square was at the center of the festival district, where the Eldian community of Liberio had been instructed by the Mali authorities to gather in their best clothes for the celebration. Most of them did not know, when they put on their best clothes that evening, that they were the audience for a declaration of war against their own ancestral homeland. Most of them did not know, when they brought their children to the festival, that the speech they were about to hear would frame them as the descendants of monsters. They simply came. They brought their children. They stood in the crowd. They lit small lanterns. They waited. On the stage, lit by torches, Willie Tiber began to speak. He spoke for some time. He spoke about Eldian history. He spoke about the empire that had once oppressed the world. He spoke about King Karl Fritz, who had retreated to Paradis and tried to atone for the crimes of his ancestors by entombing the wall titans in the three walls. He spoke about the modern moment, about how the time of titans was ending, about how new technology was making the old powers obsolete, about how the Empire of Mali could no longer hold its position in the world without help. He named, in his speech, the great danger he said had returned. He named the boy who had inherited the founding titan. He named Eren Yeager. He told the world that the boy was a monster, that the boy was preparing to come for them, that the boy was the heir of every cruelty the old empire had ever committed. He asked the world to unite against the boy. He was halfway through this speech, friend, when the stage beneath him exploded. Eren had been beneath the stage. He had crawled into a sewer beneath the square and waited. He had transformed at exactly the moment the speech reached its rhetorical climax. The attack titan, 15 meters tall, rose through the wooden platform like a creature surfacing from beneath the floor of the world. Willy Tybur, on the stage above, was killed instantly. The diplomats and generals and journalists and royalty in the front rows of the audience, the gathered intelligence of every major power on the earth, the people Willy Tybur had drawn together to declare war, were directly in the attack titan's path. Eren swept across them. He ate Willy Tybur. He stepped on the foreign dignitaries. He crushed, in the first 10 seconds, the diplomatic core of the entire coalition that had been forming against Paradis. The crowd ran. The crowd, friend, was made of civilians, Eldian civilians, Eldian children, Eldian grandmothers, Eldian families who had come for a festival and a speech and small lanterns. The crowd did not move quickly enough. The attack titan does not move slowly. In the panels of the manga, in the frames of the anime, the listener sees, frame by frame, panel by panel, the cost of what happened next. Bodies in the street, small bodies, mothers with children, old men, Eldian neighbors of the families the boy was supposed to be saving, crushed by the feet of the very soldier who had crossed the sea to save them. Eren did not stop. Eren, and this is the moment in the manga that broke the audience the most cleanly into two camps. Eren had been told, in advance, that there were civilians at the festival. He had been told that Falco Grice's grandparents would be there. He had been told that the death of those civilians would be inseparable from the death of the dignitaries. He had been told that the only way to break the coalition was to break it at this particular hour, in this particular place, with this particular crowd standing in the way. He had agreed. He had come anyway. He had stepped through the bodies of Eldian children to kill the men who had been planning to invade Eldia. This is the becoming, friend. This is what we have been walking toward for 3 chapters. The boy who screamed on a broken street at the age of 10, swearing to kill the monsters that ate his mother. That boy was now 19 years old, on a stage in a foreign city, doing to other people's mothers exactly what had been done to his. The hatred that had carried him for 9 years had not died. The hatred had simply, in those 9 years, learned a new vocabulary. The Titans, the hatred now understood, were not monsters. The Titans were people. The monsters, the hatred now understood, were the empires that turned people into Titans. The hatred had grown up. The hatred had become, in its growing up, a much wider thing than a child's vow. The hatred had become a strategy. The hatred had become a calendar. The hatred had become a list of cities, in a particular order, that would have to be flattened. And the boy who had once given away his scarf, the boy who had once read books about the ocean with his best friend on a quiet floor, that boy, somewhere inside the man on the stage, was watching. Watching, friend. Not absent. Not asleep. Watching. The manga shows us his face. The face is not the face of someone who has lost himself. The face is the face of someone who knows exactly what he is doing and who is making himself do it, and who is paying the full price for it in real time. He looks down at the bodies of the children he has killed. He does not weep. He does not flinch. He does not, in the way a villain in a simpler story would, smile. He simply continues, because he has seen, 4 years ago, in a basement on a country estate, what the rest of the night will require. The night required, friend, the destruction of the Malian military forces gathered to put the festival down. In the hours that followed the speech, the Survey Corps descended on Liberio from the air. They had been waiting, in airships off the coast, for exactly this moment. They came down in the Survey Corps' signature green capes. They fought through the streets. They engaged the remaining warriors of Mali. The Jaw Titan, held by a young man named Porco Galliard, was killed. The Cart Titan, held by a quiet woman named Peak, was wounded. The Warhammer Titan was captured by Eren. Its holder, the youngest sister of Willy Tybur, hidden in a hardened crystal beneath the cobblestones, was extracted and consumed. Eren now held 3 of the 9 Titans: the Attack, the Founder, the Warhammer. By dawn, the Survey Corps had withdrawn. The streets of Liberio were empty of soldiers but full of dead. The festival lanterns, where they had not been crushed, still burned. The Tyburs were extinct. The coalition was dead. The empire of Mali, which had ruled the world for 100 years, woke that morning to discover that the boy from the island had come for them, and that the war they had thought they were going to start was, in fact, already lost. This was the beginning, friend, of the last year of Eren Yeager's life. He had, after Liberio, returned to Paradise. He had not, however, returned the boy his friends remembered. The boy who walked down the gangplank of the airship in Paradise Harbor was an older boy, a colder boy, a boy who did not speak much, who answered questions with single sentences, who did not laugh at his sister's quiet jokes, who did not, in any of the small private moments his friends tried to engineer with him, return to the boy they had once known. We must, friend, spend a moment on what happened in those months, because the months between Liberio and the rumbling are the months in which the boy chose, knowingly and deliberately, to make himself unrecognizable to the people who loved him. He did not become a monster all at once. He had to make himself one. He had to do it on purpose. He had to construct, day by day, in the small interactions of every meal and every patrol, the version of himself that his friends would, eventually, be able to kill. It was the hardest work, in some sense, that he did in his entire life. Mikasa, friend, was the first he had to harden himself against. She had loved him since she was 9 years old. She had killed for him. She had bled for him. She had, every day of her life since the trafficker cabin, oriented her existence around his existence. She was, in some sense, the entire reason he had survived to be 19 years old at all. And she was also, by the prophecy he had seen in the basement 4 years earlier, the person who would, on a certain rooftop, in a certain end Titan, have to be the one who killed him. He could not let her love him to the end. If he let her love him to the end, she would not be able to do it. She would freeze, on the rooftop, in front of the end Titan. She would not raise the blade. She would not enter the mouth. She would not do the work the future required of her. And if she did not, the rumbling would not stop. The rumbling would go to 100%. The world would die fully, and there would be no calibration, and no half-saved survivors, and no surviving Survey Corps to negotiate Paradise's continued existence after his death. He needed her to be able to kill him, so he made her able. He took her aside, one afternoon, in a small room somewhere on Paradis, and he told her, paraphrased, friend, because the line belongs to the manga, that she had only ever loved him because she was an Ackerman, and that the Ackermans were, by some old story about their bloodline, biologically compelled to attach to a host. He told her that her love for him was not real love. He told her that it was a kind of slavery. He told her that she did not, in fact, know him at all, and that she did not, in fact, want what she had spent her whole life wanting. He told her she should let him go. He told her she had always been a slave to her own blood, and that he had finally come to understand it. It was a lie. It was, friend, an enormous lie. The Ackerman bloodline did have a particular biology. The biology did not work the way Eren described. The biology had nothing to do with romantic attachment. Eren knew this. Eren had read the same texts the Survey Corps had read. Eren was lying to Mikasa in that small room, with full knowledge that he was lying, and full knowledge that he was breaking the heart of the person who loved him most, and full knowledge that he was doing it on purpose, so that, when the rooftop came, she would be able to do what the rooftop required. She did not believe him at first. She argued. She raised her voice. She, in one of the only moments in the entire manga in which we see her angry with him, slapped his hand away. But the lie did its work. The lie planted a seed. The seed grew, in the months that followed, in the quiet places of her mind. By the time the airship rose above the rubble of his end Titan, by the time she stood in front of the great wreckage of his last body and chose, knife in hand, to enter the mouth, the seed had grown enough. She could do it, because he had made her able to do it. He did the same thing, in different forms, to almost everyone. He told Armin, in a different conversation, that Armin had become weak, that Armin's friendship with Connie and Jean was making him soft, that Armin had betrayed the harshness of what their war required. He told Connie that Connie was a coward. He told John that John was a politician. He told Levi, who he could not have hardened by words alone, by a different method, by refusing to obey his commands, by walking out of the Survey Corps, by leading the soldiers who agreed with him into a faction that would, in the end, oppose Levi's own faction. He told Hange, the scientist, that she was a sentimentalist. He told Pixis, the old general, that he was a politician. He took, one by one, the relationships that had held him together for 9 years, and he broke them. Not because he hated those people, friend. He did not hate them. He had never hated them. He broke them because he loved them, and because he had seen, in the basement, 4 years earlier, that the only way to save them was to make them able to kill him, and to make them not feel guilty when they did. This is one of the cruelest charities, friend, that any character in modern fiction has ever performed. He turned himself into the villain so that his friends could survive being the heroes who killed the villain. He did the moral work in advance. He took the entire weight of the rumbling onto his own name so that no one else, after his death, would have to carry it. Armin could be the man who killed the world. Mikasa could be the girl who stopped him. The Survey Corps could be the alliance that saved humanity. The story could have heroes. The story could have a clean ending. The cost of the clean ending was the boy, and the boy, who had seen this cost in the basement 4 years before, agreed to pay it, quietly, alone, without telling anyone what he was doing. We come, friend, to the rumbling itself. We have, in the previous chapters, named it without describing it. We have named it as the catastrophe at the center of the story. The thing the world has been afraid of for 100 years. The thing every previous holder of the founding titan has refused to do. We have not yet, in the body of this episode, sat with what it actually was. We must, briefly, because what Eren did in the year 854 is, in some sense, the heaviest single act anyone has ever asked a fictional protagonist to commit. The walls of Paradise, friend, the 3 great rings of stone we have spoken of since the first chapter, were not actually made of stone. They were made of titans. Karl Fritz, the king who built them, had used the power of the founding titan to entomb millions of wall titans inside them, millions of bodies, of 50-meter creatures, packed shoulder to shoulder around the perimeter of the island, hardened into the appearance of stone. The walls were a deterrent. If anyone ever attacked Paradise, the king's vow had said, the walls could be unmade, the wall titans could be freed, and they would march across the world, and they would trample everything in their path, and there would be no force on earth that could stop them. Karl Fritz had vowed never to do this. Every founding titan after him, bound by his vow, had refused. For a century, the walls had held their dead. Eren Yeager, who was not of royal blood, who was therefore not bound by the vow, who had freed Ymir Fritz in the paths from her 2,000-year slavery, and asked her, gently, to lend him her power, unmade the walls. He did it from the back of the largest titan body anyone had ever seen. When Gabi Braun shot off his head on the rail bridge, friend, the shining centipede, the parasite that had once given Ymir Fritz the power of the titans, the source of all the strangeness of this story, emerged from his severed body and reattached and built him a new body. The new body was not the attack titan. The new body was the end titan. The end titan was several 100 meters long. Its spine was an enormous, segmented chain of vertebrae, more centipede than human, extending out the back of its body like the train of a queen's gown. Its mouth was full of teeth. Its arms were claws. It did not walk. It did not need to walk. It crawled on the long centipede of its own spine across the broken landscape of Shiganshina, and it stood, and it raised its head, and it screamed. When it screamed, the walls began to unmake themselves. You should picture this, friend, the way the manga showed it. 3 rings of stone around the entirety of an island, beginning, in a single moment, to crack, the stone falling away. The bodies of millions of wall titans, naked and pale and identical, stepping out of the rings, 50 meters tall, every one of them, walking, marching, in an order that was no order, pouring out across the island, pouring into the sea. The sea did not stop them. They were not, in any meaningful sense, alive. They were titans. They did not need to breathe. They did not need to eat. They walked into the water. They walked across the floor of the sea. They emerged, days later, on the coastlines of the continents on the other side. And they walked. They did not run. They did not stop. They simply walked and crushed everything beneath them with the patient, exhausted forward motion of an army that knows it has all the time in the world. The world had no defense. The world's armies, the empire of Mali's combined forces, the alliances of the other nations, every weapon, every cannon, every airship, was effectively useless against 50-meter titans in the millions. The wall titans walked through artillery fire as if it were rain. They crushed armored columns. They crossed mountains. They came down into valleys. They flattened cities. The death toll, in the first weeks, ran into the hundreds of millions. By the time the rumbling was stopped, by the time the alliance, the strange coalition of Eren's friends and Eren's former enemies, working together for the first time, managed to bring his Titan body down, roughly 80% of the people who had been alive on the earth at the start of the year were dead. 80%. You and I, friend, sitting in our quiet rooms tonight, cannot fully picture 80% of the human population of the earth disappearing in a matter of weeks. The number is too large. The number is, in some sense, designed to be too large. Hajime Isayama has said, in interviews, that he wrote the rumbling at this scale deliberately, because anything smaller would have allowed the listener to argue that Eren's act was a kind of surgical strike, a kind of harsh but limited defensive action. 80% does not allow that argument. 80% is genocide of a scale that no real-world war has ever reached. 80% is the destruction of nearly every named character outside Paradise who has ever existed in the manga, plus the destruction of every named character's family, plus every neighbor, plus every passing stranger, in every market the listener has ever been shown. 80% is, in the world of Attack on Titan, the end of the world. And the boy who had once given away his scarf, the boy who had once read books about the ocean with his best friend on a quiet floor, the boy whose mother had begged him from beneath a beam to take her son and run. That boy, on the back of the Titan, ordered the 80%. He stopped at 80. He could have gone to 100. He chose not to. He chose, deliberately, to leave a gap. 20% of the world remained. Among the 20% were enough armies, enough leaders, enough nations to rebuild. Among the 20% were the survivors of Mali and the survivors of every former enemy of Paradise. Among the 20% was the small alliance of his friends, still alive on the airship that was tracking him, still capable of catching up to him, still capable, if they were quick and lucky and willing, of killing him. He left them the gap. He left it on purpose. He left it, friend, because he had seen, in the basement 4 years before, that the gap was the only way out of the loop he had been born into. If the world died completely, Paradise would be alone, and Paradise would, eventually, do this to itself again. If the world survived, but Paradise was destroyed by the survivors in revenge, there would be no Paradise to inherit the peace he was buying. If the world survived, and Paradise survived, but the architect of the rumbling lived to lead it, Paradise would become a permanent global enemy. The only path that gave the people he loved a future was the path in which the rumbling did most of its work, was then stopped by his friends, and ended with his own death at the hands of the heroes who had stopped him. The heroes would, then, have the political cover to negotiate. They could go to the surviving world and say, "We killed Eren Yeager. We killed the man who killed the world. Paradise is not Eren Yeager. Paradise is the island that produced the alliance that stopped him. Let us live." Armin, in fact, would say exactly this. In the years after Eren's death, friend, Armin Arlert, the small, soft, scholarly boy who had once read books about the ocean on a quiet floor, would stand in front of foreign generals and announce, with full deliberation, that he himself was the man who had killed Eren Yeager. It was not, in the strictest sense, true. Mikasa had killed Eren, but the political fiction served. Armin took the title onto himself. Armin became, in the eyes of the surviving world, the human hero who had stopped the monster. And Armin, in that role, negotiated the survival of Paradise. The plan worked. The plan worked, friend, because Eren had designed it to work, and had played his part so completely that even his best friends, even Mikasa, even Armin, did not know, until the very last conversation in the paths, the full extent of what he had done. We must, friend, come now to the rooftop. We must come to the airship, and the End Titan, and the small alliance, and the girl with the knife. The alliance, in the final battle, was a strange object. It contained the surviving members of the Survey Corps: Mikasa, Armin, Jean, Connie, Levi, Hange. It also contained, working alongside them for the first time, the surviving warriors of Mali: Reiner, Annie, Peak, Falco, Gabby. The two factions that had been killing each other for 9 years were now, in the last days of the world, in the same airship. They had no choice. The rumbling was beyond either of them alone. They needed each other to reach Eren. They flew. They closed the distance. They engaged the End Titan in the air. The fight on top of the End Titan, friend, lasted hours. The End Titan was so large that the entire battle took place on its back. The combatants, the airship crewing landings on its shoulders, Eren's defending titans spawning from the body of the End Titan itself, the small flying soldiers of the Alliance leaping from segment to segment of its spine, were specks on a creature the size of a mountain range. Hangzhou died holding off pursuing titans in a rear guard, buying the Alliance the minutes they needed. Other names fell that we have not had time tonight to give. By the time the Alliance reached the head of the End Titan, they were diminished, exhausted, bleeding. But they reached the head, and on the head, the final scene played out. Armin transformed into the colossal titan, in an echo of Bertolt Hoover's own transformation a decade earlier, and detonated himself across the End Titan's neck. The blast severed the spine. The end. Titan's body collapsed. The shining centipede, the parasite that had built the body, fell into the dust, and the head, the small original head of the boy Eren Yeager, lay in the wreckage, still alive, just barely. Mikasa entered the mouth. She walked, friend, through the broken teeth and the steaming flesh and the strange darkness of the End Titan's interior, and she found him, not the End Titan, him, the boy, the original body, the original face, the original Eren, lying in a small chamber at the center of his last form, his eyes open, looking at her. The story does not give us many words in this scene. It gives us, instead, a few. He looked at her. She looked at him. Something passed between them that the manga did not put on the page, because no page could have held it. She raised the knife. He did not stop her. He did not speak. She did the thing. She severed his head. And then, and this, friend, is the small, devastating gesture the manga gave us, the one that almost no one expected. She lifted the severed head, and she held it to her face, and she kissed it. The boy who had given her a scarf when she was 9 years old. The boy who had told her, the day before, that she was a slave to her blood. The boy who had built, over the months since Liberio, an elaborate lie to make her able to do exactly what she had just done. She kissed him. She kissed him goodbye. The rumbling stopped. Across the world, in that moment, every pure titan reverted to human form. The wall titans of Karl Fritz, mid-March, collapsed into the dust of the places they had been crushing. The power of the titans, the gift of Ymir Fritz, 2,000 years old, the long-running curse and blessing of the Eldian people, dissolved entirely from the earth. The shining centipede, the parasite, the source of all of it, was gone. Ymir Fritz, in her pale country, was finally free. She did not appear in the world again. She had, in the strangest possible way, completed her 2,000-year wait. Mikasa carried his head out of the End Titan. She carried it back to the airship. She carried it back across the sea. She carried it home. She buried it, friend, beneath the tree on the hill that we visited at the end of the first chapter of this episode. The tree was the tree she and Eren had raced toward as children. The tree was the tree he had once napped beneath in a small, forgotten afternoon 9 years earlier. She buried his head in a small box, beneath the roots. She knelt in the grass, and she spoke to him, the way one speaks to the dead. She told him a few small things. She said she missed him. She said she wanted to see him again. And the bird came. The bird that we met at the end of the first chapter, friend, was always going to come. The story had been pointing at it from the first time it showed us a bird crossing a wall over Shiganshina. The whole shape of the story, the cage, the boy, the dream of the sky, the eventual freedom of even the smallest creature to cross the line, bent itself, in its last image, toward the bird. The bird descended. The bird hooked its small beak into the loose end of Mikasa's scarf. The bird wound the scarf, once and then twice and then a third time, around her neck. The bird looked at her, briefly. The bird flew away. She said thank you. She said it to the bird, or to the air the bird left behind, or to the boy whose head was in the ground beneath her. The manga does not say which. The manga does not need to say which. Eren Yeager, friend, was 19 years old when he died. He had become, in the last year of his life, the largest single threat the world had ever produced. He had killed more people in a few weeks than any war in any of the long human centuries. He had broken the political architecture of an entire civilization. He had ended the power of the Titans forever by ensuring that the woman who held it would be freed by his own friends in his own destruction. He had, in his last act, designed his own death so carefully that the people he loved survived it, and the island he loved had a chance to negotiate its survival, and the boy he had once been was buried beneath a tree on a hill on the island he had spent his entire life trying to walk out of. He did not, friend, ever leave the island. This is the smallest and quietest tragedy of his life. He had dreamed, since he was small, of the world beyond the walls. He had dreamed of the sea. He had dreamed of mountains, deserts, foreign cities, foreign skies. He had stood on the beach, at the age of 15, and looked at the ocean for the first time. He had crossed the sea once, to Mali. He had stood in the streets of Liberio. He had seen, briefly, the wider world. And then he had killed almost all of it. And then he had come home. And then he had been buried, head only, beneath a tree on a hill, on the island he had been born on, in the dirt that his mother had once swept from his school clothes when he came home dirty as a child. The boy who wanted to leave never left. The bird, on the day Mikasa knelt at the grave, was the only part of him that ever managed to cross the line. We have, friend, in this episode, spent 4 chapters with Eren Yeager. We have spent the first chapter on freedom, on the boy who looked up at birds and dreamed of crossing a wall. We have spent the second chapter on revenge, on the boy in the street and the oath he made, and the slow collapse of that oath in the basement under his father's house. We have spent the third chapter on prophecy, on the gift the attack titan gave him without his permission, and the way that gift turned his entire life into a basement of his own future. We have spent this chapter, the 4th chapter, on becoming the threat, on the coffee shop in Liberio, and the festival in the square, and the end titan, and the rooftop, and the kiss. We have not, in any of these chapters, told you what to think of him. This is not the failure of the chapter. This is the honesty of the chapter. The story we have told tonight is, in the end, a story that refuses to settle. Eren Yeager is not, in the manga, exonerated. He is not, in the manga, condemned. He is held for 139 chapters, across 11 years of publication, across 4 seasons of anime, across the lives of millions of readers and listeners in every country on the earth, in a single open hand, and the listener is asked to look at him. You have, tonight, looked at him. You have looked at the boy in the street. You have looked at the trafficker cabin. You have looked at the gate of Trost and the basement of his father and the chapel beneath the chapel and the long staircase down. You have looked at the country of Ymir Fritz in the pale sand, where a slave girl waited 2,000 years for someone to call her free. You have looked at the coffee shop and the festival and the end titan. You have looked at the rooftop. You have looked at the head, carried home, buried beneath a tree, with a bird coming down to wrap a scarf. What you make of him, friend, is what you make of him. The story trusts you with the question. So do I. And so the story rests here, friend. If it stayed with you, leave a small note below. I will be here again, with another life, another long night, another quiet hour. Until then, This has been Mr. Kaylor. Sleep well.